Oh, yeah.
She talked to us.
Okay. Conference.
Yeah.
All right, does that notification mean we're ready to go? Wow. All right. Well, I think why don't we begin the meeting 30 seconds early, all right? So we're going to call this March 18th regular council meeting to order. And Judy, if you could please do the roll call.
Indeed. Hausch.
Here?
McQueen.
Here.
Krieger.
Here.
Sanford.
Here.
Kevin Stokes is out of town at the moment. Also present is Village Manager Patty Bates and Village Planner Denise Swinger.
Okay, good. So the first thing on our agenda, and I'm going to come down for this, is we have a couple commendations that I'm very excited about. I even wore a jacket I can button. All right, so Officer Raful. What's our best angle here? So maybe we'll, you're the one that will get the picture actually. So I'm going to read this commendation. And by the way, yeah, yes. So on December 13th, 2018, Officer Paul Raful responded to a call for service involving a shooting. During this call for service, Officer Raful entered the scene and secured the weapon and persons present to enable emergency medical personnel to enter the scene and to attempt life-saving measures. He then proceeded to further secure the scene to preserve evidence for the investigation. During this call for service, difficult for all involved, Officer Raful acted with the highest regard for those at the scene and with extraordinary integrity. Particularly given that Officer Raful's limited time with the Yellow Springs Police Department, he presented himself in the deepest traditions of police work in general and of the Yellow Springs community in particular. Officer Raful's actions were the essence of the Guidelines for Village Policing, a guiding document for the peace officers of Yellow Springs. Officer Raful is hereby commended for his actions on the night of December 13, 2018, and has the thanks of the Village of Yellow Springs, its residents, council, and of his fellow village team members. Presented by the Council of the Village of Yellow Springs, March 18th, 2019. Thank you very much, Oh, okay. All right. All right. And I have another commendation. All right, this is a special evening. All right, so Dispatcher Ruth Peterson. Good to see you. On December 13th, Dispatcher Ruth Peterson answered several emergency calls for a shooting. Although a seldom occurrence in Yellow Springs, Dispatcher Peterson responded to all callers with professionalism and calmness. She quickly gathered the details of the incident and relayed that information to the responding officer. She made immediate contact with the necessary off-duty personnel, all the while keeping in contact with the officer and the other dispatchers from Green Central Communications by phone and radio. During this call for service, facing an immediate need for information and assistance, Dispatcher Peterson handled the situation with a sense of urgency and accuracy that proved to be immeasurable in assisting the responding officer and medic crew. Dispatcher Peterson acted with the highest regard for those at the scene and with the highest level of integrity of her position. Ruth demonstrates the qualities and traits that every police department requires of their dispatchers. Ruth has always been and continues to be a valuable member of the Yellow Springs Police Department. This situation only highlights the dedication and level of service that Ruth provides to the staff and citizens of Yellow Springs. Dispatcher Ruth Peterson is hereby commended for her actions on the night of December 13, 2018, and has the thanks of the Village of Yellow Springs, its residents, council, and of her fellow employees. All right.
Sorry.
Paul, did you grow up with Ruth? Did she get in the middle of them? Let me scoot over here.
Put all the cameras. Thank you.
Don't exit, we have one more.
I've got one more here. If I could ask Sergeant Naomi Watson to come up and stand with me, please. The Greene County Prosecutor's Office is commemorating National Crime Victims' Rights Week for the 36th consecutive year. Each year during April, the Victim Witness Division staff plans an event to call attention to crimes victims' rights. Past efforts include candlelight vigils, a garden on the courthouse lawn, a memorial walkway, and a handmade quilt in memory of homicide victims. This year, partnering with the Wright State University and Michael's House Child's Advocacy Center, the division hosted a training featuring national speaker. The event began with an award ceremony, and Sergeant Naomi Watson of the Yellow Springs Police Department was presented the David P. Eckert Outstanding Law Enforcement Service Award. This arrived last week, kind of as a surprise from the state of Ohio General Assembly House of Representatives. On behalf of the members of the House of Representatives of the 133rd General Assembly of Ohio, we are happy to congratulate Sergeant Naomi Watson on receiving the 2018 David P. Eckert Outstanding Law Enforcement Service Award. Throughout your distinguished tenure as an officer for the Yellow Springs Police Department, you've demonstrated exemplary dedication to performing your duties and fulfilling your responsibilities with the utmost efficiency and integrity. This honor has been awarded to you for your praiseworthy record of service, for you have given of your time and energy far beyond what was required or expected. And it is only fitting that you be acknowledged for the leadership and initiative that you have displayed in all your efforts. Your unwavering commitment to excellence has won you the esteem and appreciation of everyone with whom you have worked with in your community that you have safeguarded. To your credit, time and time again, you have exhibited superlative knowledge, professional ethics, and collaboration within your supervisors, peers, and the public. And we commend you on your exemplary record of this accomplishment. Thus, with great pleasure, we applaud you on your recent accolade and salute you as one of Ohio's finest law enforcement officers.
Naomi. Thanks. Congratulations.
Well deserved.
Hey, thank you, Chief.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
All right. Thanks, police team.
Well, that was uplifting.
That was really great. Okay. All right. So, and we'll stay uplifted with some. We don't have any swearing in, I guess, today. Is that right? Okay. So, any announcements?
Yes. The Sound of Music, which is the high school musical, was delayed because of illness, and it is going to be played in April, and I am definitely going. I already have my ticket from the Thursday, April 11th through Sunday, the 14th. And so people who've already pre-ordered tickets, you can go exactly the same day that your tickets, and if you can't go that day, you need to call and change them. So I'm very excited about that. We have two other announcements. One regards the Miami Valley Cycling Summit, which will be Friday, May 10th in Miamisburg, and our own Brian Hausch will be making a presentation to the group. And lastly, spring cleanup, Yellow Springs spring cleanup, when you can throw all your junk out to the curb, well, some of your junk, will be the week of May 6th through the 10th. And Patty, is it picked up basically on the day?
It's on your regular day.
Picked up on your regular trash day. If you have any questions, call the village.
They call the utility office or my office, either one.
Okay, yes, exactly.
Okay.
And
Lisa, did you
Lisa.
have?
I
Yeah.
do. In case you haven't noticed the wonderful new banners that are up in our town, Those are the banners that Kevin Lighty and his students at the high school have prepared to celebrate Women's History Month and to bring attention to the many women who are directly related or have roots in Yellow Springs that have had an influence not only in Yellow Springs, but to the world. So check out those banners, and then I also want you to watch for this week in the Yellow Springs News. There'll be a special supplement, and in that special supplement, there'll be information prepared by the students, background biographical information about each of the women. So if the weather is nice, it would be a great thing to do to take a walking tour with the special supplement and look at the different banners and read about the women. So spread the word, and thank you to Kevin Lighty, and thank you to his students, and also thank you to Megan Bachman and the Yellow Springs News, because this has been a lot of work that has been shepherded from the very inception. So yeah, I think it's a great thing, and I understand that thanks to Johnny Burns, has confirmed that those banners will be up through the end of April. So it won't just be limited to the Women's History Month. Yeah, thank you.
Great. I have a few things. I did want to mention that to kind of get on people's calendars, that opening day for trails this year is April 13th. Karen Wintrow and Mark Heiss are leading the charge, and we expect to have another great event. Last year, even though we had snow on the ground, we had a couple hundred people. The brewery was a big part of that. I hope you guys are again. And that's a really fun time to celebrate the amazing trail network that we are on. And we should have some elected officials there. I invite my fellow council members to be there. I know the mayor loves to be there as well. Typically our fire and police departments grill hot dogs that are given out. So are we doing that again?
I don't know that you can keep them away.
All right, awesome. So put that on your calendars. It's going to be a lot of fun. I also wanted to mention, last time we talked about, there's a lot of interesting legislation on the state level these days. We talked about the gas tax, which unfortunately has been a little diluted, but still hopefully we get some positives out of that. But the newest thing, and I thought it was pretty ironic, is Governor DeWine introduced a Tobacco 21 policy for the state. And I do want to remember that when we had some opposition to doing that in Yellow Springs, it was because people could leave the town and get their cigarettes, right on our borders. And it seemed like everybody that was in opposition about just doing it locally thought if it could be done on the state level, that was a good thing. I would urge you to call Senator Hackett or email and Representative Perales and tell them that you support this legislation. I already have. I'm going to be there on Wednesday to reiterate that. I think it's very important that the more we can delay young people from using tobacco products, the less likely they are to be addicted, and a big part of this is all the health cost that's associated. This did remind me, by the way, that lots of states are talking about Vote 16 as well. So I want to make sure that at our next meeting, we do talk about the potential charter issues. So we've delayed that long enough. Patty, one of the ideas I had is maybe we could reach out to Wright State or another law department and have some law students do a little research on it for us and just kind of see. I mean, I've done research, but maybe that could be something that could just kind of help us see what the barriers might be. Okay. And then I wanted to mention, we had talked last year about signature events that make sense for the village to support because they're in line with our village values. Street Fair has traditionally been an important event that the village supports. Of course, Martin Luther King Jr. Day is very significant, and a big one is YS Pride. Yellow Springs Pride has decided moving forward, it will always be the last Saturday in June. I had a great meeting with the organizing group about things that the village could do to help support that activity. I believe they're going to come to our meeting on April 1st. But I just kind of wanted to bring that back into scope. It certainly is in line with our Arts and Culture Commission and thinking about some of these great things like, Lisa talking about the banners, which are so awesome. So I want to make sure that, these kinds of events are something that we actively support because, especially with our village value that is about being a welcoming community, it's very important that we walk the talk. And finally, April 10th. I think we are now confirmed that that is going to be the public forum for our final village manager candidates. Judy, did we decide we'll start at 6:30?
That
We
it
have not
hasn't been
decided that.
Okay.
completely finalized.
Okay, so we will start in the evening. But I heard something about potentially 6:30 was a good time for people. We always have childcare at the youth center so that everybody can participate. It will be in the John Bryan Gym because last time we had several hundred people that were here. And so we want to make sure that we have plenty of room. There'll be more details about that, but that's another thing to put on your calendar. And we are planning to announce those final candidates at our April 1st meeting. So we are, I think I can say we're down to 9 great candidates out of the initial 62. We're very excited about the process. We're not that excited about losing Patty Bates, but I know you're going to be happy to retire, and you're going to make sure that we're left in good stead.
I will make sure you're left in good stead.
Okay.
I'll try to occupy myself in other ways.
Well, we've got several commissions that you can join. Okay, so that's all I had.
It's not the first time I've heard that. I'm gonna say.
It's a
I
good
doubt
way.
it.
It's a good way to stay involved. Okay, so any other announcements? Okay, the consent agenda has 3 items. We have the minutes from our last meeting, March 4th, and we have a resolution about renewing the health insurance and about the dental insurance as well. So can I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, review of the agenda. Anything we need to add or change? Canetta?
Could we move special reports up before citizens' concerns?
Sure. And I think actually we may be permanently doing that after today, so we can do that for sure. Marianne?
Yeah, I would like to have a report about the transient guest lodging meeting. Maybe that could happen at the same time as a special report.
Sure.
So you mean today?
I mean, today, yeah.
Yes, okay.
And then,
By Canetta. She was facilitating the meeting, I wasn't there,
Yes.
so.
Okay, anything else?
does anyone want to, do you want to move the creation of Energy Savings Improvement District up into special reports and put that first so they're not
Yes, I
visiting
do.
us for so long?
I do. So,
Thank you, Judy.
I know you guys would like to stay till the end of our meeting, but.
And you're welcome to.
And you are welcome to, but yeah, but we are gonna move you guys up. Okay, anything else? All right, if not, then let's move into petitions and communications. Mary Ann?
No. I mean, I have none. I made them all under announcement.
Okay, what about this mayor's
Oh,
eligible?
sorry, I didn't see that in my hard copy.
All right, Judy, do you want to say something about that then, or?
Oh, I
didn't really go through it.
apologize, I totally missed it. It is in my hard copy.
Okay.
Well, seems like it speaks for itself. This is highlighting the charges that are eligible to go to mayor's court, which, is kind of related to how we want to send all cases to mayor's court that can go there. And then, we'd like to have our regular update of how things are going with the mayor's court, and they seem to be going well. Okay?
Yeah, I just feel like it's important to stop and reflect on that, because if you turn back the time, a year, certainly 2 years, this was, there was a lot of work and energy put into this. And to have the mayor, everything that's happened, that the mayor has put in place and that Flo has done. It's really an accomplishment.
Yeah, I agree. Thanks, Lisa. Okay, legislation. Judy, let's do the first reading of ordinance 2019-06, and why don't you read it in full, please?
Alrighty, this is amending the official zoning map of the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio for the property known as Millworks, identified by the following Greene County parcel ID numbers, which I will let you read on your own, from I-1 mixed-use industrial to PUD planned unit development. Whereas the Planning Commission, following a work session on February 5th, 2019, and a public hearing with deliberations on February 12th, 2019, made certain findings and recommendations pertaining to an application submitted by Millworks LLC and its principal, Jessica Yamamoto, requesting that the official zoning map for the Village of Yellow Springs be amended from I-1 mixed-use industrial to PUD planned unit development for the property known as Millworks, with the following Greene County ID parcel numbers. Whereas Village Council on March 4th, 2019 received the findings and recommendations from the Planning Commission and voted to approve the rezoning request for the property and to amend the official zoning map from I-1 mixed-use industrial to PUD planned unit development for the property. Now therefore, Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby ordains that Section 1, Village Council hereby amends the official zoning map from I-1 mixed-use industrial to PUD planned unit development for the property known as Millworks with the Greene County parcel ID numbers as follows. Section 2, this ordinance shall take effect and be in full force at the earliest date permitted by law.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move.
I second.
Okay. Denise, do you want to kind of review where we've been?
At your last meeting, after a review of the recommendations from Planning Commission for rezoning Millworks to PUD, you, as mentioned, unanimously agreed to move forward. The recommendations were accepted, along with an additional one that had been left out previously by Planning Commission, which is, rather than going over those again, I think they're on page 7 and 8 of your minutes. So Planning Commission recommends moving forward with this.
Okay, thanks, Denise. Any questions or comments from council? Okay, do we have questions or comments from citizens? All right. This is a first reading, but I would like us to take a vote. We will have the formal public hearing at the second reading at our next meeting. But Judy, let's go ahead and do the roll call, please.
Indeed. Krieger.
Yes.
Sanford.
Yes.
McQueen.
Yes.
Hausch.
Yes. Okay. And then we have one other piece of legislation, which is Resolution 2019-12. And Judy, let's go ahead and read that in full as well.
Okay, 2019-10, actually.
Oh.
Unless I messed something up.
You're right, it is 10.
Oh, shoot. It wasn't me. All right,
Yes.
this is amending rules and procedures for council. Whereas the Charter for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio calls for council to adopt rules and procedures governing its meetings, and whereas Council for the Village of Yellow Springs wishes to amend its rules and procedures to clarify permissible behavior during meetings and to amend the order of the regular agenda, now therefore Council for the Village of Yellow Springs, Ohio hereby resolves that. Section 1, the attached rules, Exhibit A, and procedures are hereby adopted with the requested changes and clarifications. Section 2, these rules and procedures shall take effect at the earliest date permitted by law.
Okay, can I get a motion, please?
I move.
Second.
All right, Judy, I think since you're our gatekeeper, I'll let you highlight what the changes are to the procedures.
Sure. Robert's Rules of Order goes on at great length about proper behavior during meetings, but we do not put those all in the, we sort of make a reference to Robert's Rules of Order. So this sort of calls out some of the acceptable behavior during meetings, which are no overt displays of clapping or booing or those sorts of potentially chilling expressions that might prevent someone from speaking their mind. So that's there more precisely. And then you had wanted special reports to be moved ahead of citizens' concerns as a regular feature, and then to move your executive sessions first rather than last in the meeting, and that's it.
Okay. Any questions or comments from council?
Yes.
Yes, Mary Ann.
I think in terms of behavior, the change that was added, excuse me, was about clapping, but also putting signs up things like that. And I know at council, we've had a couple discussions about the impact of doing those kind of behaviors, but I just wanted to address it again, because I've heard that along with dying, public speaking is some people's biggest fear. And so, in fact, I've heard that there are some people who won't come to council meetings because it is their biggest fear, speaking in public. So to make it to really be a welcoming place where anyone can get up and speak in front of council, we want to make it a safe place. A safe place means that you can get up and say what you think, and you don't have to worry about someone booing you or clapping for the people who disagree with you or any other kind of sort of group behavior that can intimidate people. So I think it's important that we enact this, and thank you, Judy. I think you were, maybe initiated this.
It was, council
Brian,
had brought that up.
okay, well, anyway, I
I did the paperwork.
I'd like to make a comment as well.
Oh, yeah, where's my gavel?
Do it.
Lisa?
You know, we've talked quite a bit about the amount of time that citizen comments take. And we've also talked about how, compared to other councils and other municipalities, our council is more active in certain ways. Perhaps some would criticize us for getting involved with aspects of the village that you could say maybe the village council shouldn't be involved in. I would not want anyone to think that this new rule means that the council is not interested in listening to the community. I think it's the opposite of that. I really do. Because we do want to be able to hear as many voices as possible. And one of the most challenging things about being a council member is that we know that there's a lot of people out there in the community who, for whatever reason, aren't expressing their opinion to us. And as elected officials, we rely on hearing from the community. So I just really want to reinforce that this for us is, or I should just say, I should speak for myself. For me, my support of this is for two reasons. One, so that we can hear as many voices as possible, as efficiently as we can. And two, that it's always done with civility and respect for each other. It's not in any way to squelch or limit the voices of the community.
Well said. Canetta, did you want to add anything?
I think Lisa summed it up pretty well.
Yeah, I actually think, yeah, Marianne and Lisa, I appreciate your comments. I don't have a lot to add except, you know, I will say that I did initiate this because after saying no clapping, snapping, sign waving for several meetings, I thought we should make it formal. I think respect is key. I think what's important, you know, for us is, as Lisa said, to hear all the thoughts of community members or be as inclusive as possible. And that's how we make decisions, not based on the loudest voices that come to this meeting, but based on our community as a whole. But I do want to reiterate that no matter what criticisms I get for allowing citizen concerns to go long, I think that's really important for our village. I think it's what citizens expect. And as Lisa also said, we're not going to change that approach, at least for this council. So, any questions or comments from citizens? All right, if not, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, any opposed? Okay. So we now have special reports, and I believe we're going to talk a little bit about what.
Go ahead. I was just going to introduce them.
Go ahead.
So tonight we have with us Paul Newman and Eric Henry from the Greene County Department of Development, as well as Brad Rui from Dinsmore and Shoal, who is going to speak to us about the PACE program and energy savings improvement districts. Brad.
Great, thank you. Good evening, Council. Again, my name is Brad Rui with the firm of Dinsmore and Shoal, 255 East 5th Street, Cincinnati, Ohio. I very much appreciate you taking a few minutes to listen to a few details about the PACE program. I work very closely with Paul and Eric at the Greene County Port Authority. And I tried to just keep this at sort of the basics. There are a lot of questions that you may have about this, which I am more than happy to answer. I tried to anticipate what some of those questions would be. So, and if you, do you have the presentation in front of you?
Yeah, she's glitching. She's,
Okay.
she'll be, we're just about there.
Okay.
Yeah, watch pot.
There we go.
Okay, great. Well, I'll start on page 3, which gets into a few of the details. And so PACE is an acronym for Property Assessed Clean Energy. And along with PACE, you'll hear the acronym ESID, E-S-I-D, which is an Energy Special Improvement District. So yeah, we're starting there. So an ESID is necessary in order to facilitate or implement the PACE program. And so we'll talk a little bit about the different parties overview, then we'll go into a little bit of the process. And again, please feel free to interrupt me at any time. PACE is a program offered in Ohio. It's a form of economic development, but it is certainly not limited to commercial industry, although as we'll talk about a little bit in a minute, the practical reality of it is it favors commercial more so than residential development. But residential development and improvements are certainly part of the program and certainly are permissible. It really has to do with encouraging the financing of energy efficiency equipment and improvements, as well as renewable energy. So when I say energy efficiency, that would include sort of the traditional energy conservation measures, or ECMs, such as boilers, chillers, windows, door replacement improvements. This can be done in conjunction with new construction. It can be done in conjunction with renovations or improvements to existing properties. When we talk about renewable energy, it is, as you would expect, wind, solar, geothermal, hydroelectric type of improvements that you may be making to a particular property. And the whole key to the PACE program is the ability to assess property. So it is that assessment, or special assessment as you know them, that is really the key that allows for and secures the financing. There is minimal upfront investment, and I don't mean that there's any sort of bargain or discounts if you're thinking of energy efficiency improvements, but what I mean by that is if you have the cash to pay for a particular type of energy efficiency improvement or renewable energy, you really don't need PACE. This is when you want to finance a particular project. So the special assessments that are levied, like any other special assessment on your property tax bill, really run with the property and not necessarily the owner. So if you finance this up front and you move, or a business moves, it stays with the property. So when we say minimal upfront investment, it means that it's supposed to be financed up front and paid for over time, that you don't have an individual personal or business cash outlay from the beginning. And it is used as an economic development tool. Again, we'll talk about in a little bit why it's, as a practical matter, not so much a legal matter, why it favors commercial development more so than residential. So let's talk about some of the players that would be involved with a PACE program. And that is sort of the second bullet point there. Actually, if we go back to back to slide 3, we'll go.
Way ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, so under the heading Public-Private Cooperation. The idea there is a property owner will petition either a municipal corporation, a village like Village of Yellow Springs, or a township. So it's limited in its implementation to municipal corporations in townships when it comes to political subdivisions. That petition will be to say, assess me. Assess my property so that I can pay for this. It's a request for a property assessment, which is not always the case, right? Assessments are sometimes levied without necessarily the property owners agreeing to it. It does apply to public or private type improvements, governmental or non-governmental, or a mix, if you have the right mix of properties. So the property owner makes the petition, the municipality or the township is involved from the standpoint, and this is why it's generally limited to municipalities and townships, is because the authorizing statutes for municipalities and townships allow and permit for the implementation of special assessments. So when it comes to the special assessment process, it's along the lines of your normal processes for adopting special assessments. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail, but it is, as you would expect, a resolution of necessity, a resolution to proceed, and a resolution implementing the assessment. So there is a little bit of a process to it, but it is just the normal processes for special assessments. And we'll talk about that as part of the bigger process in just a moment. The Port Authority comes in from the standpoint that a Port Authority is a facilitator. So the Port Authority, for the most part, is able to issue the debt, provide for the issuance of some sort of obligation, whether it's a bond or a note, but the evidence of some sort of debt that an investor, whether it's a financial institution or insurance company or others, will be willing to buy and then have repaid through the special assessments. The Energy Special Improvement District, and again we'll talk about this in a little bit more detail, is a nonprofit corporation that is primarily composed of representatives from the municipal corporation or township which creates the Energy Special Improvement District, and also the property owners. Not every property owner needs to be a member of the board of directors of this nonprofit organization. As we'll see in a minute, this nonprofit organization is a little bit unique in that there are some governmental characteristics to it and some non-governmental characteristics to it. So it's sort of quasi-governmental in its nature and how the officials of that nonprofit actually operate. And then there's a lender. You'll have a source of funding. You need somebody to actually finance this. And what's not mentioned up there, seen up there, a couple other parties might be a trustee, and we also get the county auditor involved so that the assessments flow smoothly through the system and can go directly to repay the debt. If you go to the next page then, on page 4, we've kind of said there's a few more details there, but again, generally speaking, we're talking about traditional energy conservation measures and also renewable energy type projects. We won't spend any more time on that, but if there are specific questions as to whether a particular project might qualify, I'm glad to entertain those questions. So let's talk a little bit more about the process then on the next slide, on slide 5. So the process begins with petition from the property owner. That petition requests a few things. It requests for the formation of an Energy Special Improvement District. It talks about the formation of a project plan, and that we'll talk about the project plan will be the next major bullet point on that same slide that we'll talk about. And then again, the levying of an assessment. Because the assessment is being requested by the property owner, we forego all of the formalities typically with special assessments. So we don't have the notice and the public hearings that come along with a typical special assessment. It is getting right directly to the legislation levying those. So one of the nuances about forming an ESID, this nonprofit corporation, is that it has 5 board members. 2 of those board members, by statute, are required to be representatives of the political subdivision of, in this case, the village of Yellow Springs, if you so choose to do this. One would be somebody who has to be involved with economic development for the village, and the other would be the village manager, and that is by statute. So for the initial formation, you have to have 3 other board members. Those other board members have to be property owners. Now, you don't have to have 3 distinct property owners, but you do have to have a minimum of 3 properties. Now, different people take different views on that, but a generally accepted view is that because you have 5 board members, 3 of them have to be property owners, 2 are appointed, you need 3 properties. There's all kinds of different ways. If you don't have 3 properties, we've gone to the lengths to subdivide properties so that you would have 3 properties or parcels, but that is one of the nuances of this. For starters, you would need a minimum of 3 parcels to get it going. And we'll talk about the contiguity requirements and the formation, the jurisdiction in which this may cover in just a moment. So we'll move then to the project plan. The project plan along with the petition to create the ESID, is presented to council for its consideration. The project plan talks about the purposes, the terms and conditions of the ESID itself. One of the main characteristics of the project plan is the actual territory that would be covered. The territory can be as broad or as specific as you like it. You could talk about particular parcels on Main Street or Elm Street. It could be the three originating parcels, if you will. That's all it takes. However, you could also, in your project plan, identify the fact that your particular ESID is intended to cover the entire village, if you like. You can go beyond the village borders. In terms of energy special improvement districts, and there are other types of special improvement districts, an energy, an ESID, is distinct from an SID, a SID, which was originally what the statute was formed to accommodate. ESIDs were later added to the statute. So in order to go, so you can cover any parcels that you like. When it comes to forming the ESID itself, it could cover the entire village, it could cover a portion of it, and you can go beyond village borders. But if you go beyond village borders, you do need to include other political subdivisions, other townships, and municipal corporations that are contiguous. However, within the village itself, you do not have to have contiguous parcels. So you could have a parcel on Maple Street, and a parcel on Elm Street, and a parcel on Oak Street. And that can form and be part of the ESID. And whether you want to encompass, again, everything in between there, you can, or you don't have to. But here's the bottom line, is that if you identify, let's say, the entire village as being part of the ESID, each property owner still has to consent to be part of the actual ESID. So while your project plan might identify the entire village, and there are some advantages to doing that, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So if you have some development or residents that want an ESID, want to take advantage of the PACE program, you do have an advantage of forming this or being somewhat inclusive in that you don't have to go through the reformulation process. But again, so is there any advantage to having one ESID in the northern part of the village and another ESID in the southern, or having 10 ESIDs? That kind of depends on the composition of the board. You know, you may have an ESID that has specific directives, but there really isn't an advantage in that one gets, you know, by having more parcels in it, greater advantages, or some sort of what am I trying to think of advantage by having more numbers in it. So there's no economy of scale, is what I'm trying to say. In many places, ESIDs will be formed so that they're all-inclusive. And again, property owners can elect to be, must elect to be in it, and must elect to have their properties assessed, even though they're identified as part of the plan.
Can they be added later?
And they can certainly be added later, and that's a great segue into the next point. So each time a property is added to the project plan is amended. However, you don't have to go through all of the formation process that we'll talk about, but you still have to go through the process of the special assessments. And there's sort of two distinct processes between setting up a project plan, approving the initial petitions, and creating the ESID, which takes some time. All of that can be gotten out of the way to allow for the addition of particular parcels. And in fact, again, even if you include the entire village, each time a parcel is added, that project plan must be updated. And it will be updated to add other things that are included on the bullet points here. Plans and specifications would be part of that. How the ESID and how the particular project will actually come to fruition, who you're working with, if you're implementing HVAC improvements for energy efficiency purposes, who's going to undertake that, who is your contractor, what is the expected time frame for completion. Those kinds of details are included in the project plan, and that gets amended each and every time. And the project plan is something that is approved by ordinance or by resolution by the implementing municipal corporation or township. So there certainly are more details to the project plan, but that's just a little bit of an overview. When it comes to forming the ESID itself, so on page 6, a little bit of an overview about the ESID itself. The ESID will include articles of incorporation. So on the one hand, we have this nonprofit corporation with articles of incorporation, have a board of directors. Again, that board is a minimum composition of 5 for starters. As you add property owners, it can grow and grow. But what is very clear is if you include other political subdivisions, another township or municipal corporation, then representatives from those political subdivisions must join that particular ESID. Again, you can have separate ESIDs. What that means, if you have separate ESIDs in different parts of the village, is that your village manager and your designated other representative, sort of economic development representative, would serve as part of several boards of the ESIDs. So they may be very busy, at least at first when it comes to forming the ESID. So it is a nonprofit corporation. The board of directors will vote. It is a public body, and the board of directors, for Ohio Revised Code purposes, are quote-unquote public officials, but the office that they hold is not a public office. So there's just some oddities about it. It truly is quasi-governmental, and it's really sort of picking and choosing which parts of public law have application. So I'll back up for a minute. When I talked about the formation of SIDs, which are special improvement districts, those have been around for a while, and those are used a lot of times in development projects for, say, lighting or landscaping, and they work very similarly in that you assess those particular properties, and the benefits that you get them typically go to help public infrastructure, a lot like tax increment financing might do, helping public infrastructure or amenities with development projects. And again, they're assessed as well. There's a little bit of a distinction, whereas special improvement districts, which again, we're not really talking about this evening, we're talking about more the energy side, but just to do a quick compare and contrast, special improvement districts have a life of 10 years, whereas the assessments for energy special improvement districts can go on for 30 years. So there's a bit of a distinction there. And then the contiguity requirement, special improvement districts within the village must be contiguous. So the idea is that you have maybe a corner, businesses or perhaps where you want sidewalk improvements or some public improvements with special improvement districts, whether it's lighting, sidewalk, landscaping. The idea is to have more of a collective group of property owners in a particular area. And again, that can grow, but its growth is somewhat limited because all the properties have to be connected. With energy special improvement districts, you don't have to have that kind of connectedness in forming those. It is limited to specific parcels. Everyone has to consent, and I think we've probably talked about the other bullet points on page 6. So we'll talk on page 7 then about the participating public approval. Again, you have to approve the special assessment legislation, but beyond the special assessment and before you get to the special assessment legislation, the political subdivision has to approve the ESID itself, the formation of the nonprofit corporation. It's also necessary to approve the articles of incorporation as well as the project plan. Typically, all of this is brought forward together. You don't typically bring just a petition from a property owner without developing the articles of incorporation and having some thought put into how broad, how wide you want this ESID to encompass in terms of its jurisdiction and territory, and who you want represented on this. So typically there would be some preliminary meetings to kind of work out who you would want and what your vision is for the ESID itself. Once that petition is presented and drafts of the articles of incorporation and the project plan are presented, council then has 60 days in which to approve this. So in a lot of cases, there's some back and forth, there's some review, there's some fine-tuning that goes on. Once that is approved, so once the petition is approved and once the project plan is approved, then you get to the special assessment. And that's probably a good segue into the next bullet point on page 7. The special assessment legislation is, as you would expect, resolution of necessity, resolution to proceed, resolution levying special assessments. A lot of times you can forego that more formal process that you would have in a normal special assessment situation. In some cases, political subdivisions determine that their rules, their charter, their revised code will allow them to get through that entire special assessment process in one meeting. That's not the case everywhere. Some like to respect, have a little more respect for a process and do several readings. So that is completely up to Village Council in terms of how that would be handled, the special assessment process. So now that sort of brings us to, I think, kind of an interesting discussion about who really benefits from PACE. So PACE is a lien, it's a special assessment. Under Ohio law, assessments are different than taxes, but as a practical matter, your special assessments are going to show up on your property tax bill, the property tax list in duplicate, and they're going to be levied and collected in the same way the taxes are. And when it comes to lien status of your special assessments, they're treated exactly like your taxes. So if there's delinquent tax, the same treatment is received for delinquent special assessments. In other words, they rise to first lien status. So if there's a mortgage on your property, that presents concerns sometimes for the mortgage holder. And that's why PACE is a little less effective when it comes to residential property. And so what Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, some of the largest purchasers of residential mortgages in this country, and FHA have all said uniformly is that they will not purchase mortgages that have PACE financing on them because they feel that it jeopardizes the mortgages that they're putting on the properties. So while the Ohio Revised Code allows for individuals and residences to receive the benefit of PACE, the challenge is that in the marketplace, in finding a ready lender or financial institution or buyer of your, whatever it may be, $250,000 improvement, I mean, that would be a pretty good size improvement for a residence, and less. It's very difficult to find interested lenders for those types of obligations. Now, it is possible to pool them, so if you had a group of community residents that were interested in bringing all theirs together at one time, you'd have to find the right lender who's willing to lend to individuals and property owners. So that's why the commercial side, it's just a little bit more, it's a lot more active just as a practical matter because, first of all, the scalability. Usually the improvements that are going in on the commercial side are a little bit larger, so that's more attractive to financial institutions. And then secondly, with most commercial property, there are ways to kind of get through some of the hurdles that are present on residential property. In other words, commercial lenders are used to having guarantors, for example, stand behind their obligations and provide additional benefits. Commercial property, you're also a lot of times working with a commercial lender who you're also interested in purchasing the PACE financing. So if you're a commercial lender, or I'm sorry, if you're a commercial developer and you work with XYZ financial institution, there's a very good chance you're going to go to XYZ financial institution and ask them to purchase this. And so if there's a problem, there's a good chance they may be holding your mortgage as well. So just as a practical matter, there are some issues on the residential side. And there have been efforts to try to have Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and FHA reverse their stance on this. California has been successful because California has created a statewide reserve, basically. So if there are problems, this statewide reserve would act as a backup. But California, to my knowledge, is the only state that's been successful. And I want to say they've been the only state to do residential PACE. That's not true, but they've been the only one on a continual basis to have residential PACE be, reach certain critical volume limit, have that be more of a viable program for residences. Ohio really just isn't there. Cooperative agreement would be on page 8. That just gives you a sense of some of the documentation along with the project plan and the special assessments. Cooperative agreement is where the Port Authority, for example, would, again, probably more on a commercial basis, agree to issue debt obligations, bonds, notes, lease purchase obligations that are repayable. Then you would have the political subdivision agree to levy the assessments. You would have the Port Authority assign all of its rights and obligations, usually to a trustee. Usually you have a third party on the financing side, just to make the obligations assignable or saleable. So you have a financial institution who is at first willing to purchase it, or a lot of times insurance companies are purchasers of PACE obligations, but they may not want to stay in the market, or hold that obligation for 15 or 20 or 30 years. So having a trustee makes it assignable or saleable, giving it a secondary market, so to speak. And then the energy audit, an energy audit is certainly not necessary. It's not a statutory requirement. However, some lenders may say, we want to see that the energy savings that you're going to obtain by implementing these energy conservation measures or renewable energy improvements will actually have more savings or enough savings that take care of the cost. And that's usually the idea, is that you're willing to be assessed on your property because you think your energy bill is going to go down enough so that the savings will pay for the improvements. So an energy audit may not be required, but it's certainly not required under statute, but some lenders require that. So next page, page 9, project capital. Again, most of these projects are what we would call private placements. So that you're looking for a local financial institution to place these, insurance companies, your local regional banks. A few of these projects, if there's a critical mass, if they're truly large projects or large developments, may go out into the capital markets, and you might have an underwriter that would sell bonds in lower denominations and sell them to institutional investors like the Fidelity Investments of the world and that sort of thing. Generally, that's not happening because these the bonds, the issuances simply aren't large enough to get that kind of interest from the marketplace. So usually your lenders are going to be local. And page 10 just talks about some of the different documentation. I won't go into a lot of detail about the documentation, but let me just do a quick recap if you're just looking for high level on the process. So from a process standpoint, we've got the petition, which is presented to council. Along with the petition, then we have a draft of the Articles of Incorporation, the project plan, which include the jurisdiction and what you're intending to cover, the parcels, at least the initial parcels. From there, that gets approved by council, and then from there you approve these special assessments, which can generally happen pretty quickly. Again, that's complete deferment to your process. Then the Port Authority, assuming that you're issuing bonds or obligations for this, which is typically the case, the Port Authority would have its approval as well, approving the bonds, and then you have the financing process and finding the ultimate lender, satisfying their lending requirements. They're going to go through their typical credit and underwriting processes as any lender would, and they'll ask for specific financial information and want the assurances that their debt is going to be repaid. So sort of an overview, but glad to answer any questions.
So I had a couple of questions.
Yes.
Let's say that the village had a petition, and because we have a couple of different things going on right now, so let's say we had a petition, and if the village chose to move forward with this, could the ESID be run? We are also talking about a dedicated community development, thank you, development corporation.
Sure, sure.
So could the ESID be run through that board as opposed to creating yet another board?
Oh, could you designate that board as your... So what I would say is that you do need separate articles of incorporation for the formation of an ESID specifically. Mm-hmm. Is there a way to tie the two? There may be, but keep in mind that as part of this very specific nonprofit corporation, you've got to have, at least, with any sort of initial project, these 5 board of director members. And part of the requirement under the statute, that is chapters 1710 in the revised code, says that The other, so you have 2 appointed from the political subdivision forming it. Then you have the other 3. The other 3 must be property owners. And now, again, you can have a single property owner that has several parcels, but what you do, and so you have the one owner, and then they can have 2 other designees that they appoint to be part of that board. But, so if there's a way to do that, typically the way I've seen it is, a very specific formation. Now, what I do see with, Community Development Corporation is that, for example, in Cincinnati, we've used the Energy Alliance, which is a formal group and organization. They actually administer and run the program. And so what I sort of glossed over, but I do have as part of the presentation here, is some of the fees that get paid and part of the assessment costs are for the administration of this program. And there's really not a lot to administer, but there is follow-up typically in your project plan to actually check and make sure that the intended energy efficiency improvements, renewable energy, were actually made, that you're actually getting some savings from this, and that the assessments are actually being collected and run to the trustee for payment. So there is a small amount of administrative follow-up that's necessary year after year, and that's typically built into the project plan.
Could that include the audits?
Correct. That could include an energy audit if that's something. Now, there is a lot of flexibility. So when you implement this plan, I don't mean to say that you're going to, but any municipal corporation that implements this has the ability and the flexibility to require certain program requirements. And there's a lot of flexibility, and the statute does not necessarily go into any kind of detail in terms of what you can or must implement, but there is a lot of flexibility, and requiring some sort of follow-up or energy audit, that sort of thing, is certainly well within your rights.
Are there any ESIDs in Greene County, and can you give any examples, either specific or general examples of how it's being used?
So I'm not aware of any in Greene County at the moment, unless, gentlemen, you are. Oh, I take that back. We did. We formed one for Fairborn. Wasn't it Fairborn, I believe? With the Mall of Fairfield Commons. Beaver Creek, that's right. Thank you. Yeah, so the Mall of Fairfield Commons had energy efficiency improvements that it was hoping to make. And we went through the entire ESID process. We formed it. And the energy efficient, I think it was mostly HVAC. I think they were replacing the roof and a few other repairs like that. And that went through the Greene County Port Authority. They issued about $3 million in bonds, I think, for those improvements. I believe it was a 15-year financing, and we had all the requisite parts of the statute, and Beaver Creek went through the assessment process. So there certainly is working with the petitioner, the property owners, and the village, along with the Port Authority. But yeah, that's one example. I've worked on one recently with the city of Blue Ash in Cincinnati. So what we did in that particular case is we created an ESID on 3 parcels, and it was a developer that owned these parcels, and the developer wanted to do sort of a test case. And so we created the ESID on these smaller parcels where there's about $250,000 worth of improvements on each of the parcels, roughly. And it was all to sort of set up a larger development that's coming on. And so all of the processes for that ESID were put into place. And so when this larger development, sort of a mixed-use development, actually it's in the process of development right now, the PACE program can be easily implemented. And again, PACE can be done in conjunction with new construction. It can be done in conjunction with renovation, existing buildings, that sort of thing.
That was my clarifying question. So can the need across the 3 parcels be completely disparate one from another?
Yes.
For example, an entirely new development that strives to be energy efficient from the beginning, a renovation project that wants to try to add new things and change things. So totally 3 different projects.
Yes, and the statute only requires that one of those projects, in order to form the ESID, actually be active in moving forward. So it does require at least one project to be active and moving forward.
You mean two parcels wouldn't have anything happening on them?
So the idea is that they can be part of the ESID, but if the plan is not to make those energy improvements for some time down the road, there still must be a plan to actually implement those, but the timing doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to match up. Yep.
And there could be an ESID that was created jointly between the village and the township if we chose to do that.
That is correct. That is correct. Right. Yes. Yeah, again,
So two of the parcels, for instance, could be in the village and one could be in the township.
that is correct. Yeah, so let me just give you my 2 cents on when we've had these conversations with, so I think there are advantages because you have an ESID that's set up, and if you have others who are asking about development, you have that sort of, ready answer to say, yes, we formed one, and yes, we can amend it to include you in it. The other part of it is, if for some reason, however, your 2 political subdivisions have different ideas of what they want to allow or encourage or develop, or perhaps you have different things in mind when it comes to zoning or properties that you want to encourage development on, you could certainly have a disagreement, in terms of working cooperatively together. You may have different goals, maybe would be the best way to say it. So I really just float that out there. I think there are advantages. I think there are potential downsides, if you go across political subdivisions. But I will say this, there are plenty of examples of regional ESIDs that include, several political subdivisions coming together within a particular county. So I don't want to discourage it. I'm just setting the table to say, just something to think about.
Can you amend the territory as well, or just?
Absolutely you can, yes.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah, and that's really what you're doing when you're adding. But I understand your point, is that if you initially identify the village and the township, could you go back and amend that? Yes, but then obviously, if you have parcels in both, I think I'd probably have to follow up with you to see exactly. I've never really been through that scenario in terms of whether you would, form 2 separate ESIDs, and if you could continue on with what's been done. Or I think perhaps the thing to do in that case is just to leave that ESID formed and have it relate very specifically to those parcels, and then form another ESID that includes everything but those parcels. So you really can't have 2 overlapping ESIDs.
Do the bonds get issued for the particular project? So let's say you have 3 parcels and you're doing a different project on each parcel, and maybe the timing's different. The bonds get issued for each particular project and assessed for that property on which the project is located.
That's a great question, and there's really a lot of flexibility with that. So let's take a couple of scenarios. If you have one project that's certain and the others are less certain, and you're going to issue bonds for it, if the other 2 projects, know that those projects are forthcoming in the next year, if you issue bonds, a year ahead of time, you're paying interest on those bonds without any assessments actually being levied on those parcels for collection purposes. So you're paying interest that you really don't need to pay. So I'm not sure that really makes sense to do that. On the other hand, there are ways to issue obligations where you only pay interest when you draw, sort of like a line of credit almost. Now there are bonds like that, but there are limitations to that. You have to draw within a certain amount of time, depending on whether you issue them as tax-exempt bonds or taxable bonds. So the other flip side of that is, rather than issuing all 3 at once, if you issue just one off, so to speak, you're going to match your debt service timing much more closely. So I think you kind of have to look at the timing. If it's going to be a year, that may be pretty far out where you're paying interest when you wouldn't normally have to do that on those bonds. So that might be getting a little ahead of yourself doing that. gut
What if there
reaction.
were going to be a residential development and whoever the developer would be, would be paying for the infrastructure, so for the street lights, for example?
Okay, okay.
And they wanted to have some very energy efficient street lights. Or maybe there would be even a solar project attached to that particular
Sure.
residential project, but that the particular mortgages on the houses wouldn't, that would be paid for separately, then could that kind of project?
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. So those, it is possible that may be more ripe for just just an SID rather than an ESID, a special improvement district.
Yeah, I guess a developer wouldn't want to be paying over 15 years or something.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's certainly possible to form an ESID where the developer owns the property and then the properties are sold, and you divide them up and you put the assessments on. There's a little bit of a timing issue with that. You'd probably want to subdivide the properties, in that case. But if you're talking about, more like public properties where there would be lighting along streets, that might be more ripe for a special improvement district, more so than an energy special improvement district.
I have a question. If you have a
Do you have to
development,
come up to the mic?
Can you come up, Ted, please? Thank you.
forgive my question. If you have a new development and you want to implement energy efficiency for every new project within the development, can you force covenants and restrictions on the land that force that energy efficiency to the house without tying it to the mortgage? So that the lending isn't complicated.
Yes, so let me reiterate to see if I'm understanding. So what you're saying, is there something that you can write into the deed to covenant the property owners or to force the property owners to eventually put a special assessment on their property?
Yes.
Yeah, and what I would say with that is you're never going to get bonds issued. You're not going to get anybody to actually issue your bonds without the special assessments already being in place. So as a practical matter, you might be able to try that, but without the actual special assessment legislation in place and improved, because the bonds that are issued are not general obligation. They're not full faith and credit. The Port Authority really cannot issue full faith and credit bonds except under very extreme situations with voted bond issue. And they're not obligations of the village. So typically, they're obligations of an entity like a Port Authority. And you're not going to find a lender to buy those bonds without the special assessments actually being in place. The promise to put that on, there are lots of failed developments where the special assessments never happened. They've suddenly, put their money out there, they were lending, and then there's no way to repay it. Developer leaves town, and the bank's left holding back. That's just likely not going to happen.
Anyone else? All
So
right.
glad to answer any questions. You have follow-up, please, my contact information's on there. Shoot me questions at any time. Glad to help.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brad.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
Very interesting.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, I mean, obviously there are some things that we've talked about that this relate to. It reminds me of the incentive policy that we passed. And does this become another incentive moving forward? I also think about the, energy efficiency piece, and I'm very interested in thinking about the residential side of things,
Yeah,
beyond the commercial.
And we, in fact, Eric and Paul came out and we had a meeting with a local business. I had just actually read something about this. We talked about the potential for this to help not only existing businesses who want to make improvements, but new businesses who want to come in and start from the ground up. We have, as I said, a few different things that are going right now that could potentially benefit, projects that could benefit from this. So I felt like the timing was good for the presentation to come before council, and I very much appreciate Paul and Eric facilitating it and Brad being here to present for us.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right. Well, I guess I will just, are you stepping out?
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, as you're stepping out, I just want to say, if we've got 3 viable property owners, I don't see why we would wait. So, thank you.
It's easy to think of 3, isn't it?
I would think so. And then I think we layered over the whole village and more could add. So,
It's easy.
all right. Excellent. So, Kanetta, should we do the HRC annual report next?
Yeah.
Okay. Is Tim here for
Yeah.
that? All right, Tim Baum.
Our report is really long. So, hello, I'm
Hi.
Tim Baum. I'm representing the Human Relations Commission today. I believe that you have our end of the year report, so this will be brief. 2018 was a very successful year for the HRC. We hosted block parties, developed the new neighbor welcome kits, helped YS schools take donations for school supplies, and assisted with the utility roundup program. HRC also sponsored many projects, which include Restorative Justice Symposium, Be Present, Beloved Community Project, Day of Empowerment, First Baptist Church Backpack Drive, NAMI Suicide Prevention, and the YS Zombie Walk. This year, HRC plans on undertaking several major projects that will help folks who lack access. One project is to provide some solutions for folks who are experiencing homelessness. While opening a homeless shelter may be beyond our capacities, we would like to provide some assistance on the issue. Another project we're excited about is creating a village tool collective. This would allow villagers to check out tools from a short-term project, kind of similar to a library. Last year, HRC used $8,500 to fund block parties and 14 projects. For 2019, we are requesting a budget of $9,000. Thank you. Questions?
I have a couple comments. One about the homeless work that HRC is going to be doing. The Housing Advisory Board has also discussed the issue of homelessness. We've come to the conclusion, I think you have, that the village doesn't have a capacity to
Yeah, I know.
initiate a homeless shelter.
I was one of the
But-
people who looked into it. I don't,
But whatever HRC may come up with, we should be in conversation about that, and that could be some way written into the housing plan. The other, about the tool library, probably would be good to talk to Kat Walters and Dewart Headley, because this is the kind of thing that they've been talking about. You know, they have that repair cafe once a quarter, I think. Are you aware of that?
I'm aware of a few different things going on. I think right now in the HRC where we are with that is we're trying to get everybody together that has these same ideas before we move forward, because it sounds like more than one person has
Yeah,
kind
so
of
I think they
similar.
would be good
So
to.
I think we're going to be running ads in the paper or something very soon to say, hey, if you're into this, let's get together and talk.
Yeah, and I actually did connect Kat and Deborah via email when I heard the idea.
Yeah, Deborah specifically.
Good.
What was
All
the
right.
budget last year?
8,500?
All right.
And what do you say again?
9.
85 this year, we would like 9.
Which we already approved, so congratulations,
Yay.
see? That's right, we appreciate all the great work and keep the block parties going strong.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Tim. Okay, and then I think, Kanetta, you were gonna tell us about the transient guest lodging community conversation?
Yeah, it was a really interesting meeting. So I definitely walked away kind of thinking a little bit differently about transient guest lodging, but I think that one of the overarching things from that was that it's something that we should monitor as we go along. There were folks who were wanting a little bit more data, especially around the numbers of who has been displaced due to transient guest lodging, primarily renters who have been displaced. So I do think that that's important to have that information, even if it's like going into those meetings, so we can kind of show, okay, so this is where this is an issue. And to me, I mean, it's an issue if one person is displaced for something like that. However, there were many people who spoke about the fact that the transient guest lodging that they have in their homes, whether they're renting out half of their duplex or a room in their house, that provides subsidy for them to be able to stay here as well. So to me, the overarching conversation was primarily about affordability and housing.
So I had agreed to have the Housing Advisory Board make a recommendation because this had been discussed at council. And so the Housing Advisory Board's recommendation was to host the meeting that Kaneda and A.J. Williams did, too. And it was attended by, how many people about?
It was about
13 plus staff, I
13?
counted.
Was it mostly people who have lodging establishments?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I would like to propose to council that we move forward with what we had discussed as a proposal, which is to send to Planning Commission, request that Planning Commission change the ordinance, well, change the zoning regulations about transient guest lodging sites that would not allow individual homes to, where no one is living, to be used for transient guest lodging. It would grandfather in any and all existing transient guest lodging establishments. And it would continue to permit transient guest lodging in a home that's where someone's being lived, in an apartment that's attached or detached to in other words, accessory dwelling, or in a duplex if someone owns a duplex and they want to rent out one side. But it would not permit single housing units to be purchased or used solely for transient guest lodging. And I think having data is great, but I think it's important to get ahead of the curve rather than wait until we find out that we've had 10 or 20 houses sold, bought and sold solely for that purpose. And my concern is twofold. One is anytime, it's mostly going to be smaller homes, or anytime a house is sold for that, it means that someone can't buy it to live in it, or someone can't own it and rent it long-term. The other thing it does is that someone is coming in and out of that particular housing unit, and it impacts the neighborhood to some extent because they don't know who the people are. So I would like to open that to council to see whether you're in agreement with it.
So just related to that, second, owner occupied, were there any issues raised about, I guess, people being against that kind of policy?
So being against like, oh, you have to own this property and live in the property to, somewhat, and there were some folks who said, you know, we think that if someone has a stake in Yellow Springs, so they live in Yellow Springs, but they own another unit across town, and that's the one that they're renting out, then that shouldn't be an issue. But I agree with Mary Ann that single-family homes, even though it doesn't look like that's a large number of them currently, I agree that it does prevent people from being able to live here and really create the community, which is why people come here, is for the community that lives here and is able to contribute. Whereas if we lose more single-family homes to transient guest lodging, then that community will dwindle. So I completely agree with that.
Can I stop you for a minute? Because I thought what you asked her was, were there, and first of all, only people who had transient guest lodging attended the meeting, is that correct?
No, there was
okay.
at least one person
Oh, okay.
who,
So I thought the question was, were there people who thought that people who own a house and rent out a room or an attached dwelling unit or an apartment on their property, that people are opposed to that?
No.
And I didn't understand your answer.
oh, I thought it was an issue with someone not staying at that place. and renting
Maybe I
out.
misunderstood.
Because that's the policy you're proposing, right? Owner occupied? I mean, is
The
that,
policy, what I was suggesting is that we make a change so that we do not allow from whenever the policy is instituted forward, a single housing unit where no one is living to become a business for transient guest lodging.
Solely.
Solely.
And just specifically a single-family home, like a freestanding single-family
Well,
home?
it could be a duplex or a triplex. I'm not talking about I don't think anyone with an apartment building probably is gonna turn it all into transient guest lodging, but maybe that's something else to consider.
okay, Karen?
Karen Wintrow, I was at the meeting. I come from two different perspectives because I am on the Housing Advisory Board, but I'm also a transient lodging owner. I would say, Kanetta, that there was no support at that meeting for any restriction related to single-family, non-resident owner. I think part of the issue was that I don't know that there was a case made, a case explained for what the problem is, and that this restriction is actually going to resolve the issue of affordability. Are these houses, as they turn over, going to be affordable rentals anyway? There was a homeowner there who talked about having purchased a house that had been renting for $600 a month. The minute he purchased it with the mortgage, that rent was going to go up to $900 a month. By the time he put improvements on the property, the rent would have gone up to $1,200 a month. So that probably wouldn't be considered an affordable rental. And chances are, by the time a homeowner purchased it for whatever they purchased it for and then put the improvements, again, we're looking at a property that may not be affordable. So I think that there were a couple of things. One, really what is the issue? Because what really came down to it, that there are only 8 units, 8, maybe 12 units, that are single-family units that are used for transient lodging. If you look on Airbnb, there are any number of units. We've given out 39 permits, but only 8 of those are freestanding houses that are not owner-occupied. I don't know that rises to the level of needing a major change in legislation. The one thing that was talked about, and I think should be done, I thought it should have been done when I was on council, when the whole lodging tax discussion happened, a decision was made for transient lodging to become permitted, absolutely permitted. All that people have to do is walk into Denise's office, sign up, tell her they're going to do transient lodging. It doesn't go before Planning Commission. It doesn't have any sort of a review process. Prior to that, it had been conditional use. And the folks at the meeting, everybody supported it returning to conditional use, because even the folks at the meeting felt like, no, they don't want Yellow Springs overrun with transient lodging. And they understood that if there's a street full of transient lodging, we've lost our neighborhood feel. So if it's a conditional use, that allows Planning Commission to take a look. Are there parking issues? How many other transient lodging locations are there? So maybe that's part of what Planning Commission looks at. How many can, within a block, within a, pick an area. But again, I think going back to Planning Commission, I think is the way to go again. I don't know that I would, as I said, there was no support for your proposal, Mary Ann. And so I don't know that I would be as specific as that. I think I would go back to Planning Commission, have the numbers of transient lodging locations broken down. I assume that Denise has the breakdown of whether it's an accessory unit, an in-home unit, or a freestanding house. Have all of that data for people to examine and for Planning Commission to look at. And I think that the case could be made. Again, these folks live here. They they live here and they're doing this because they like Yellow Springs, and it certainly is a means of making a living to stay in Yellow Springs. So I just suggest sending it back to Planning Commission with maybe some directive of looking at it more generally.
Well, I'd like
Thanks,
to.
Karen. Oh,
I mean, we know that there are cities all around the country that are doing various kinds of limitations for Airbnb. And, you know, the reason why we don't have more rental is because it's very hard to cash flow. So, yeah, no one's going to be able to buy a new house with a mortgage and rent it at a reasonable cost. But I still feel strongly that we should disallow people to buy a housing unit where, a single house where no one is living, and create a business of transient guest lodging. And I wouldn't expect that transient guest lodging people would support that. But I think that neighborhood people were, which doesn't say that we couldn't also request that transient guest lodging become a conditional use again, but.
I agree with you, Mary Ann.
Can I say something?
yes, Ted?
There's another demographic to consider. My name's Ted Donnell. If somebody lives in town, they also go to Florida for 6 months a year, and in order for them to keep a residence in town, they Airbnb it for 6 months, or 3 months, or 2 months, or 9 months.
And that is a different situation than just totally buying a house as an investment and totally renting it out. So that's a different situation, because they do live in it at least part of the time.
Well, what if somebody buys a new house, lives in it for 2 weeks, and Airbnb,
Well, I
okay,
guess there would have.
I'm just saying,
Yeah,
there's
no, I
gotta be a
appreciate
threshold
that.
of
There would have
time.
to be some kind of validation that they actually lived in it. 2 weeks doesn't qualify.
Well, in a planning commission perspective, what is that time limit?
Well, I'm not having it here.
Well, no,
That will come back, that would come back to planning commission to make that decision.
Kaneda?
There's Columbus does that. So I remember, I think it was when I was living in Columbus, and I think it was from WOSU that they talked about the fact that and I'm trying to remember if it was all of Columbus proper or if it was specific neighborhoods in Columbus, like in the popular areas around OSU and whatnot, but there is, I believe you have to live in the home. It might be 80-20, or there's a percentage of time that you have to stay in the home if you want to Airbnb it. You can't just buy up units and do that. So I completely understand. And then on the affordability piece, I was thinking of it from a perspective of, you're a homeowner, and the only way that you can stay in your home is by renting out a room or whatnot, or even for the one person who had a duplex and rented out one side as a long-term establishment, that person expressed that they weren't able to do that any longer because of rising costs, and so that's why they turned to Airbnb. So those are the types of things that I think that starting with single-family homes, that goes around kind of the idea of the people who are using it for affordability, because if you buy up a single-family home, that's not because you're trying to afford to live here. It's an investment, like you said.
So I understand what everyone is saying, I do. I think there are a lot of different ways that Airbnbs could be regulated. I think that one way potentially is what Mary Ann is suggesting, owner occupied only. But what if it's occupied by a long-term tenant and half of the duplex and they Airbnb the other half? You could also limit it by a certain number of permits allowed in each zoning classification. You could limit it, and then people are put on a waiting list, and as one falls off, another one can happen. I mean, there are all different ways that you could do this and combine different things. So, I mean, what I would suggest, if council is so inclined, is to refer it back to the planning commission to look at all of the different ways that it can be regulated. Maybe we do need to get ahead of it. I'm just not sure that that one way is the only way to go. And I think there are a lot of different ways to look at it.
So, I mean, it occurs to me that one thing we all agree on is that planning commission should review this. To me, the second thing in terms of process is articulating, which I think we have, what the concerns are, and that sets the parameters for planning commission around what we want to investigate, right? And obviously, we have you there to clarify that, but our concerns are around affordability and around taking housing stock off the market. But I would agree that I'd like to hear what the different options are to achieve those policy goals. Make that
I would
decision.
be willing to write up a overview, I guess,
Mhm.
for council that could list the different concerns
Yep.
to see if we're in agreement about what our the concerns are, and then to send it to planning commission for review.
Right. And that also seems to, I think, respond to what Karen and Ted said around, I mean, here are the problems that I think we want to be proactive about. So that is where I do agree. I mean, I think communities across the nation are not just waiting until it's a problem. And maybe it never will be in Yellow Springs. I'm not convinced that it is now, but I think there's no reason not to explore this and then make a decision about what our options are. But, you know, but I tend to agree that we want to think about the problems we're trying to solve and maybe not direct, you know, the specific solution.
But to your point about getting in front of it,
Yes.
how quickly can we implement a process whereby if someone comes to sign up, they're told, you can't just sign up right now, it has to go to our planning commission, pending additional decision-making? Because I do agree that it needs to be reviewed strategically, that it's not entirely about affordability, but it's also about mixed housing stock in the village, you know? So it's not just about affordability. So I would not want us to slow down on setting up some additional review and not just handing out permits.
So
The way
you
we
would
do
like,
now.
you would like it to go back to being a conditional use?
Well, I don't know what it would be in the long run. What I'm saying is in the near term, I want to stop
Yeah,
the flow
it would have to,
until we decide what we're going to do.
well, if it's going to go before planning commission, it has to go back to being a conditional use, because council made it a permitted use, which means no review by planning commission.
Planning commission has already made a recommendation to council to do that, and it was denied by council. It's on the books, the planning commission already made that recommendation.
So, but I just want to clarify, I'm not saying that I disagree with what you're recommending. What I'm saying is, while we all work it out and decide who recommended what and how we think about it now and what you're going to propose, I want to stop the flow of,
So you're suggesting that council say, until we have sent something to planning commission, it's come back, we agree to it, that we put a
yeah.
stop
Well,
moratorium.
no, it just said it
moratorium
comes to planning
on
commission.
on new transient
Well, I
guest
don't wanna
lodging until
hold-
we're done.
Yeah, I don't want to hold anybody up, but I think it should at minimum go to planning commission.
Well, I mean, council can say, hey, you know, this is a timely issue, we want planning commission to review it and come back within a month or something.
Yeah, I mean, if somebody came with a request and it was urgent in some way, and, I mean, I just don't want to hold anybody up, but I do think we just don't want to keep handing these out.
We would hope, we
No, but I
potentially
mean,
could hope.
yeah,
So.
You know what I mean.
Okay, so why don't we have two things at the next council meeting? One is the one pager that you described, Mary Ann, that we talk about. And another is
Various options.
well, no, about this conditional use. So what is that? Is that an ordinance or?
It's an ordinance because you have to change it back to, it's changing the zoning code.
Okay, so let's bring the ordinance to that meeting as well, and then if we are ready to decide at the next meeting, we can.
So
wait,
I
Judy,
don't think
can-
we-
But I thought you wanted it to go to planning commission.
Well,
The old ordinance, is that what you're talking
right,
about?
well, so, I mean, what we've heard is that planning commission already made a recommendation. Lisa's got some concern that this could
Drag out.
drag along. I don't think that's necessarily the case, but why not just bring the ordinance? I mean, and then if we want to vote on it,
Which ordinance are you talking
to make it a conditional use. In the
Oh.
short, you know, that's
Oh.
a first response.
about? Oh, okay.
And then there is some time to, for planning commission to look at that further.
I might recommend against that only because of the way the process moved in the beginning, which was a thoughtful recommendation from Planning Commission. It was turned down. There was a little back and forth. Now there's the notion that that needs to be reexamined. The thought is, well, let's have Planning Commission look at all of those parameters and examine that. And then, well, no, let's circumvent that and just bring back something that Planning Commission had originally recommended. To me, it's a little insulting to Planning Commission to do that without it coming back to them and saying, here's what we would like to do. We'd like to bring your original proposal back. Yes, no, ideas. I mean, Planning Commission's a deliberative body that should be used on an ongoing basis rather than just kind of using them to rubber stamp something. To me, this looks like a rubber stamp. But
Well, I mean, things change. So planning commission's recommendation isn't the only thing that's come to council that's been rejected. Staff recommendations, other. So, I mean, if we just were to approve that it be conditional, then we still can go through and look at other options.
That's what I think too. I mean, so I guess let's have it, and then it can be part of our discussion. And if we want to make that decision right away, you know, and then, but I agree, that doesn't like stop in my mind that we have that full review of what we ultimately
Keep
do.
it moving.
Right. And maybe we won't decide to pass that ordinance at a next meeting. I mean, you know,
But are you able to find that
oh yeah,
ordinance?
I'm sure, I wasn't sure it got to that point, but it actually did.
Yeah.
it's probably just a matter of changing a couple words.
Would
huh?
you send that to me, Judy, too, so I can have it?
Okay, well, I like this approach, but again, I think, you know, process-wise, we should always be thinking about, you know, what are our end goals and not,
Purpose.
right, and not deciding the policies until, you know, we've vetted that properly. Okay? Any other questions or comments? Great, all right, so I believe we are into old business. And, Marianne, I think you are leading off the village manager search.
Citizen concerns.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Yes, citizen concerns is next.
Kate, Megan?
You just didn't look that concerned.
Sorry, yes. I apologize that, yeah, I forgot that.
I have a question, and it's about basketball hoops and the skateboard park.
Basketball.
Yes,
I said that I would
cool.
find this out, some sort
Yes.
of deadline, and you said April 1st or something?
Well, I believe Johnny had done an article, Megan came down and did an interview with Johnny about it, and I believe, and he actually stuck the article in my box outside my door, and I didn't get to read it again.
Okay.
But he did have a date in there that
Okay.
was in April.
Okay.
Was that
last week's paper?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was last week's, and it was on the
Okay.
inside, on the right-hand side at the top.
And has a detailed,
It has more information about it. I'm sorry? Mid-April. Okay,
Okay.
yeah, and they started it early because they had the time to get it done before some of the other larger projects came up. So there, yes, right now, it seems like it's stopped, but the plan is to get it done and have it ready for the summertime and everyone else. In the meantime, the gym is open, and if nobody's in there playing basketball or volleyball or whatever, they're welcome to go in there and play in the gym. And we will get it done as soon as we can.
okay.
And as far as the skate park, what we're hoping to do is, because we've had a couple of citizens come and want to work with us and do some fundraising, and that's what we're hoping to get started. And then, you know, depending on how the budget things go, maybe the village can do a little set aside, and we'd like to look for some grants like the Tony Hawk grant and those other things to complement the money that the community can raise and what the village can maybe afford to put in.
Okay, because there used to, am I remembering this correctly? There was a group before, I think like
Yes.
AJ was on it, and
Yeah.
did they have like set up plans for it?
Yeah,
and
we've got a.
pricing and,
Yeah, so we've got a mock-up for a bowl, and we had that priced out and everything.
oh, good, okay.
So what happened was that group promised to do a couple things. One is to help with maintaining some of those wooden, structures that they did not do that. So that was part of where we reached out to them several times. Those started to deteriorate, so that's why those came down. But I've heard Johnny say several times, which I'm excited about, and Patty's reiterated, that we want to think more actively about how to add on to the skate park and fill in some of those spaces. A very important part of this project, which I didn't have time to detail everything on Facebook, but is fixing those stairs
Right.
off of the bike path.
Oh, yeah.
That is, to my mind, huge, because now, when it rains, all the mud's going down, those, stairs have become really dangerous. So that's a really important safety feature that we're gonna address in this, sort of upgrading the area.
Great,
Yep.
okay, that's just what I wanted
Thanks,
to know,
Kate.
thanks.
Yep.
Thank you.
And then the other thing, Patty, you might as well say now that the plan is that you and Johnny are you doing some kind of press release?
Yeah,
or-
well, Johnny and I will get together tomorrow, and hopefully we'll find time tomorrow to sit down and write out something a little more detailed and put it out. We'll put it out through Megan and on the village website and on the Facebook page and answer all those questions as best we can.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, and I'll just, kind of finally say, because I mentioned this on Facebook, this has been pretty much since I've been on council. We had $40,000 that had just been laying around for 10 years that we finally invested and got the great concrete structures out there with community input. And ever since then, we kept looking at the fact that not that you have to live in Centerville to play tennis, but that those tennis courts were never used.
Right.
And so that was why we started to think about how could we re-envision this space, make it more friendly for when the Skate Park Fest happens, as it did in the past, and that's where all of this has gone. But I think finally action's starting to be taken on it, and we'll clarify all that.
People play tennis at the college.
Yes, right. So we
So
still play tennis.
there is a lot of tennis, it's just at the college.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Courts are nice.
All right. Thanks. Any other citizen concerns? Because Megan's a citizen. Yes. All right. Okay, so now old business.
We assume.
Thanks
she's
for your
a citizen.
patience.
Yes.
We won't ask.
Yes. Village manager search update?
Yes, okay. So this is something I'm going to need help with from all council members, village manager, Judy, and even Megan, maybe. What I'd like to do is go week by week, at least starting now, starting this week. So we're in the week of March 18th, and what we're doing now is doing phone and some personal interviews with the 9 candidates. Then and the logistics team is meeting tomorrow at 4 to continue working on the logistics issues. Then on Friday, council is having an executive session with the other people that are involved in that smaller group vetting process. It starts at
2 o'clock.
2 o'clock? Okay, at 2:30.
I have
2:30.
I have 2:30.
I had 2:30, but
Yep.
2:30.
it's, which is it?
2:30.
2:30, okay, that's
Yeah,
good.
2:30 to 3:45.
2:30, by that time, the phone and the personal interviews will be completed, and is there a sense that there will be any kind of evaluation of those interviews before, and a compilation of that before we meet, or will that all happen?
My understanding was that that was sort of a roundtable discussion. That was the reason to come together, was to discuss
Okay,
And will the background checks be
Yes.
completed by then too?
Yes.
Okay.
okay. So that is 2:30 to 3:30 or 4, I guess.
Well, I actually put 4 because,
4, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
let's be realistic.
Yeah,
Yep.
till 4. And the goal of that session will be to decide on 3, possibly 4 candidates. Then from 4 to 5, we have the large group meeting in which we will go over all the other things that have to be done, basically. Then, and the next thing, and those, when will those 3 or 4 candidates be notified? That day
right
or
af-
Saturday?
Right after that meeting,
Right after that meeting.
because we want them to get their plane tickets if necessary.
Okay, and they will be told that they will be coming on Tuesday, April 9th.
Yep.
Okay, we'll get there. Okay, then, a next thing that's going to happen is that there will be questions that will go out to the candidates, which should go out maybe that same time. And I don't have those questions, but our logistics team does, I think. And I don't know if Megan has gotten the questions yet or not. Okay. I think it's like about 3 questions, and they can answer 1 to 200 words. So we would have their photographs and their a short bio and their answers to maybe 2 or 3 questions. That would appear in the paper. And I don't remember which, if it's supposed to be the Thursday, the 21st, or everything is getting bumped back, or the 28th, but.
Would it be the 21st? I mean, the
Yeah.
28th or the following week. in
The
fact.
4th.
If you want it by the 28th, then it's going to have to be come in next Monday, so that's pretty tight.
No, I'd say the week of, the paper that comes out the week of April 4th, is that? Yeah,
The
that's
4th.
because right prior to the visit makes the most sense.
Okay, so then
You mean
when,
the week of April 1st?
First, which, yeah, it's
Well,
on,
yeah,
it's
the
on
paper's the
April
4th.
4th.
but
Okay.
April 4th is on the paper, or 3rd to 4th. So when,
The due date would be that Monday before the 4th.
which is the 25th?
So that gives them 5 business days
April 1st.
to prepare
It was
and
the
submit.
1st,
Monday, April 1st.
Yeah.
April Fools.
Yes.
Okay, April 1st. Now, are the candidates themselves, we tell them to get their own transportation and we pay for that?
Yes. I think that's how it worked before, right?
And-
We reimbursed you, Patty?
I drove up,
Okay.
and you guys booked my room and everything, so I didn't have a plane reservation. I
Okay.
think there was, and I'm sure Dave drove up from Pierce Township. So there was only one person who flew in from one of the Carolinas, I think.
Okay.
And I'm not sure how that, Judy would have to tell you that.
In order to control expenses, is it worth it, since there's so few, for someone to coordinate with them to purchase their flights on their behalf, so that we know that
Hey,
people are
yeah,
buying?
sure.
You know, I mean,
You mean to ask Judy
yeah,
to
they're
do
not,
that?
you know, because we don't really have travel expense policies about, you know, you have to go economy, you have to do this, you have to do that. I don't know.
We kinda do.
I'm just asking, I don't know.
We do have travel policies.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that could be sent out on Friday along with notification?
Yeah, I think, I mean, we have a way, you know, we could obviously check on Expedia or Kayak or whatever and just kind of see what, you know, but, I mean, they may have some certain ways that they fly or something that if
Yeah,
it's within that scope.
I don't think it's problematic. You may end up having to fly in 1 person or 2 people, and then that can just be a phone call to say, how do you want to do this? Here's.
And you would be
what
the
we're-"
person, Judy, who would
Sure, I
do
can do
that.
Yeah.
And you would arrange for rooms at the hotel?
Mhm.
Well, we did Arthur Morgan House last time.
You know, we did the whole cost thing, and it's very, very close.
Yeah.
There's almost no difference. There's a tiny bit of difference in that they include breakfast and the hotel does not, but it's negligible, so.
I think they have more privacy at the hotel.
Yeah,
Because
I
if they're all
suggest
in, they're
that.
competing for this job, and then they're gonna be around breakfast together and be like, hey.
Great.
Hey, everybody, I mean, I don't know, maybe that's cool. I don't know, what do you think?
I was actually at the Arthur Morgan House with another administrator from a neighboring jurisdiction to where I was. So,
No,
It's a kind of
I would suggest the
hotel.
hotel. Is
Yeah.
that okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
Yeah.
And, I mean, maybe we should reserve 3
Well-
rooms ahead of time? Do you think we need to?
Because we might have somebody who's coming
Right,
from
but-
20 minutes
but-
away and.
But you can
we're-
normally
and they
cancel a
cancel.
reservation without, so I mean, maybe let's just see. But typically, you
Okay.
can reserve rooms, and I don't think we're gonna need 3 rooms,
Yeah.
but,
Uh-huh.
okay.
Yeah, not a problem.
Cool.
we do
Okay.
not need at least 3.
Because
Oh,
some of the
I know.
candidates
I
are
get
close
you.
enough that they may go home in the
Yeah.
evening.
Okay, so then the articles will appear in the paper.
Can I just say
Yes.
something about, so, I mean, we're deciding the questions and then the paper's printing them,
Yep.
or we're collaborating
how we-
on that, or?
I may have additional questions.
Okay.
We can pursue that separately. I mean, I think
Would you come up so we can?
Because, yeah, I guess I just want to make sure that that's okay with the YS News as well, or just so that.
Yeah, so we've talked to a couple different members of the logistics committee, subcommittee, and they said that there would be questions that I would see them at some point. So that would be great to see them ahead of time. We may have additional questions that we ask of them, but we will definitely print the answers to the questions that you have.
Okay,
Yeah, so.
great, thanks.
Well, Megan, if you had additional questions, then would you ask them as part of their space then, or would you do that as a separate article, or do you want to think about that, or?
Yeah, I would have to think about it. I mean, there may be 1 or 2 more questions. It wouldn't be anything crazy, yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, sorry.
So, so the candidates would be coming in on Tuesday, April 9th, and there is something in the packet. And then I know Bettina, who's the facilitator of the logistics group, has been talking, I think, with Karen Wintro, and I'm not sure who else, about some issues, so we can go over that. And I have what Bettina had, which might be slightly different than what's in the packet, but, so,
Well, we actually
Yeah.
changed it quite a bit today.
right.
Bettina, yeah.
Well, at least there are questions about things, I guess. So jump in if I'm going off base. But anyway, so they'll come on Tuesday. The idea is that they would arrive by 3 o'clock, or NLT, what is NLT?
No later than.
Oh, okay. By 3 o'clock, okay. And we will be organizing volunteers to like pick people up at the airport, or any kind of shuffling around of people, whether it's on Tuesday or taking them, driving them around town. Anytime we need people to be moving people around, we will be organizing volunteers to do that. So initially, the plan was that evening to have a meet and greet with a reception and hors d'oeuvres that would include council members and township trustees and the mayor and Chamber of Commerce and some other people, and an orientation. So then I think what happened was it was determined that we couldn't have all the council people there at the same time,
And all the trustees there.
unless it was considered to be a public meeting. Am I correct in this,
Yeah,
Judy?
yes.
And there was also a concern, I guess, about the expense. Is that, so I'm not sure, was that whole idea just ditched? As far-
Not sure. They have a meeting tomorrow, and all of
Right.
those concerns were sort of passed along.
So
and-
let's, council, you want to have a little input, because we'll be meeting tomorrow to talk about this, our logistics team. Do you want to just let people come and hang out by themselves, or maybe If we had something in the evening, we just make sure that we don't have more than 2 council people there with them and then a township trustee or something, or? You think it's nice to have some little thing for people that evening, or just let them totally be on their own?
I mean, I think we should be doing something that late afternoon, early evening.
So, any thoughts? Like, would it make sense to do a sort of reception, but have council people moving in and out, and township trustees, one at a time or something, and just sort of a small thing, or, and the three people, or another thing would be, 2 council people could get together with one person, 2 council people could get together with another council person, we could just have them be separate and do some things that way.
Well, I mean, this is my naivete, right? So about sunshine. But if it's really a reception with like hors d'oeuvres and chit chat, is it really, I mean, we won't be making decisions. We're just going to be like making conversation. Is it really a concern to have a reception?
You can, I'm certain, get your answer to go any direction you'd like it to go. To me, it's about the perception, and that all of those decision-making individual entities are in a room at the same time with those candidates, with nice food and drink, being able to get them in a corner, ask questions, move on to the next council person, ask questions. To me, the appearance is not good. I wouldn't do it, but I'm sure absolutely you could get someone to say, there's not a problem with that at all. You're not making a decision, you're not voting. It's, to me, and I always fall on the side of how does it look and who has access to the same things that you have access to, and I tend to go that direction.
Thank you. I just don't know. So thank you.
Could we do a reception with other community stakeholders and not us, not the council? Is that a possibility?
In a way, that's addressed on the luncheon on the next day and on the one that's that next evening. But I see where your thoughts are, and I find that interesting, that perhaps if you put it out to the business community, if they wish to host their own sort of event, could that happen? And maybe a village representative or a couple village representatives were there, but it's their event.
For example, I wouldn't want to divide, like a couple of us take this person, a couple of us take
Yeah.
that, because then we're gonna, at the risk of it appearing like we're bonding with, like that's our person, So if we can't just have a little party, then maybe the best thing to do is, I like the idea of a reception, but, I always like the idea of a party. But if it's a problem, then I would think we should maybe do nothing.
Well, I will tell you that when I came, the evening that I arrived, there was nothing. Because I went out and walked around town, just to get out and see what I could see, and
What do you
realize we
think
had
would be
no
most
storm drainage
helpful?
on Xenia Avenue. I'm sorry,
What
what?
would you recommend?
I think Judy's right. I think if you have a reception, that there is gonna be that appearance. And I think that, if you do that at all, it needs to be limited, which I don't think is really fair to anybody, the candidates, council members, or anybody else. So, I mean, if you really want them to have an experience on that evening, and there's not, the downtown businesses or whomever else isn't willing to sponsor it on their own, then I can certainly take some kind, I can do something with them, not a reception or anything like that, but some kind of a, I can host them at my house as long as they're not allergic to cats, whatever. I'm happy to do that if you really want them to have something to do that evening. They may want to do what I did, and go out and walk around.
That's really what I was asking you. What do you recommend as you're coming in as a candidate?
I went out and walked around, and it was raining like crazy, like pouring, and I went out and walked in the rain, and to see what I could see, about the town and all of the different things. I think that some of them are going to be traveling, they're going to be tired, they're not necessarily going to want to mingle. I think if you want to have something that's, you know, kind of a casual, you're welcome to come if you want, but you're not required. If you want to go do something on your own, that's fine. Otherwise, just leave them on their own and let them go do their thing for the evening.
Why not do the driving tour that late afternoon, early evening, and then, you know, and then let them do dinner on their own or something?
Well,
So
you're,
if they're gonna be here by 3 o'clock, doesn't get dark until
Or-
7, and then that allows for more stakeholder meetings on the Wednesday.
yeah, because I don't know how we're going to get them through all of the department heads in that time.
Well,
Right.
actually, the revised thing that Winthrop sent around, the one that was used when Patty came, and it absolutely works it out. It was
Okay.
smooth. So I don't know that that's a huge concern, but I like your idea, Brian, because that sort of tees them up for more questions and things when they do come in and start going through the process on the 10th.
Sure. And they're not like, you know, they're not like on the spot if they are a little bit tired, if they, you know, flew in or whatever.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
would just release them early enough to go and get a good night's sleep and be ready for the 7:30 breakfast. the next
Also,
morning.
if they wouldn't all have to come by 3. Maybe one
Right.
person gets by 3, one person 4, one person 5 or something, and then the same person could drive each one of them around for, what, half hour, 45 minutes or something?
So they're gonna be in different vehicles?
Yes.
Well, no, I'm saying if they if one person could drive candidate A from 3 to 3:45, candidate B from 3:45 to 4:30, candidate C, you know, just take them one at a time, and then they wouldn't all have to get here at 3, which might be difficult depending on where.
And I think all you really have to figure out is whether you want that formal event to happen on the 9th or not, and that the idea of giving those tours on the 9th can be incorporated, because we gotta figure out the airplanes and the picking the ups and all that, but it can all get done, not a question. That's not a problem.
Okay, well, I'm gonna propose that we just ditch then the reception thing on Tuesday night. And let them do whatever they want. And if council is comfortable, when our group meets tomorrow, we can play around with the tour thing, whether it happens on Tuesday or Wednesday. Unless you decide you want it to one way or the other. It's a question.
So, okay, so the one thing that, you know, and again, I'll get back to those stakeholder meetings that, I mean, maybe it's kind of contemplated in the narrated windshield walking tour, but I don't think it really is that second day was those different stakeholder groups in addition to the village folks. And so that, to me, making sure that they get to interact with at least a township trustee, if not, you know, more than one, folks from the YS schools, Antioch College, I would strongly encourage that happens. And then when we structured it, you know, so that they had lunch at Antioch College, for example.
Yes, I
And
did.
then we had tables set up, they sat at different tables, we invited lots of community stakeholders to that.
And the stakeholders rotated.
The
The candidates did, yeah.
Right.
Somebody did.
So, I mean, you know, so I guess play around with that, but I think that's a really valuable part of that day. you know.
And that did get put into the revision that, when Karen sent back over a thing, we realized that needs to be a piece, kind of like speed dating, only with your candidates.
Speed dating lunch.
It was,
Mhm.
yeah. And yeah, because I had one lunch at Sunrise and one lunch at Antioch when I was here.
Yep.
So.
And is there any, so I have the thing from Karen, I just want to make sure, Brian, you said township trustee, who else did you say you thought they should be?
Antioch College, the schools,
Fresco.
yeah, our local businesses, and then our nonprofits too, I guess.
For the lunch?
Maybe community, somebody from Community Foundation, Lisa Abel or Gina Marie
Yep,
would be really good.
yep.
Can I, I know, I was gonna say, when is
Oh, yeah.
Come up.
Megan said, can I come?
No, let's come.
Yes,
Oh,
Yes.
okay.
you can come.
This is
Well,
a
and there
lot.
was also too some built-in actually stopping in at Cresco, stopping in at, so that someone from Cresco didn't necessarily need to come to lunch, but that they
That-
would be
that would
present
be
for a
the
quick
part of
tour
the
and a
tour.
conversation. Yeah, so that's all built into it. There was a lot of revision today.
Mhm.
Okay. And going back to the breakfast on Wednesday morning,
That too. That got revised too.
did someone want to just X that out, or?
Well, I'm like not a fan of breakfasts. They seem inefficient to me, but the way that it was reconfigured by Karen, which made a ton of sense, was have breakfast in 3 locations, 3 candidates, 3 locations, with a couple of folks meeting with them at those times.
Which is what we did last time, right?
Yeah, instead of,
So we had one group at the Emporium, one group at
At Sunrise.
Dino's, one group at Sunrise or something, yeah.
yep. So that got kind of put back into the mix to make that more efficient.
So that's on Wednesday or on both?
Wednesday.
Okay.
Okay. Then, after the breakfast, in the morning, there will be the staggered meetings with different people at the village office building. And in the thing that I have from Karen, which I don't know if I have, anyway, the thing I have that Karen had written was in the afternoon, there would be village facility tours with the water plant, the water treatment plant, and the Sutton Farm.
On which day?
This is Wednesday afternoon, so with Brad, with Tanner, and with Johnny.
Okay.
And then dinner on their own. And then we have the candidate forum, Wednesday evening. And we had initially, our group had initially scheduled it from 7 to 9, and apparently there was concern about that time.
Because we wanted the meet and greet to happen.
Afterwards?
The group meet and greet, yeah, and that was getting pretty late. So the notion was if it could move up to 6:30, and then the other question, and I just bounced it back to Bettina for you folks to address, was whether you wanted a panel type of presentation, which would take a little less time, or whether you wanted to rotate your candidates in and out so that they're on their own, removed, on their own, removed, and that takes a little bit more time, and then everyone up in A and B.
So how did we do it, Patty?
So we each had our own time, like I came down first and we had a few questions that we had to answer first, and then the rest of the half hour, we took questions from the floor. And then when I was done, I came up to AB, and somebody else went down, and we just rotated out. So the two of us who were not downstairs were up in AB mingling, while the other one was downstairs.
Who were you mingling with?
Well, I mean, there were actually quite a few people up there, because people would kind of wander in and out during the,
I think that's important because otherwise people learn from each other's, they improve their answers based on what the person before us said.
Yep,
So I think it's better to take the extra time.
yes.
Okay.
So maybe just move it up a tad to 6:30 and
I
leave
think
that little.
I think we started at 6 with mine, but I'm not,
6?
yeah, I think we did.
Well,
It
how
seems
much time will we want for each person?
We were given 30 minutes, and you had to answer, we had like 3 questions we had to answer that we were sent ahead of time. And the rest of the time, it was supposed to be questions from the floor, and I was told afterward that I was the only person who saved time to take questions from the floor.
Oh, okay.
So-
Well, so if we allowed 2 hours, that would certainly allow the 30-minute time. We might not even need 2 hours, but we need time for people moving back and forth. 6:30 for 2 hours with 6:30 to 8:30 with a half hour. Does that push it too late, do you think, for a reception afterwards? Or should we start at 6 to 8?
Most people will probably leave after the questions get answered downstairs.
What do you think?
Yeah, probably.
For like people with kids, and what do you think? 6 or 6:30?
6 really cuts into dinner.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
does.
think 6:30, just to give
So
them time for dinner.
6:30 to 8:30, and then we could say 8:30 to
Well,
9 plus.
Yeah.
I
And
mean,
if,
people aren't going to be hanging out.
and if
too.
you only have 3, I mean, it depends on whether you have 3 or 4 candidates is your problem.
That's
Because you
true.
don't know. If it's,
Yeah.
if you only have 3, you're gonna be done downstairs by 8-ish.
Yep, the Bryan Center, Youth Center,
Childcare.
We'll make it so.
yes.
Okay, so that's Thursday evening, then Wednesday evening. Thursday morning, initially it had said breakfast at sunrise. I don't,
Are we going to divide them up for every meal?
okay, so
I would,
here
yeah.
Karen's thing says breakfast in 3 different places, just
Yep.
like we were talking about on Wednesday. And then we have the meeting with the council people.
Mhm. And I just want to make sure that we are allowing enough time for each of those.
So let's talk about how much time we would need. Here, in this one, I mean, I'm working off all these different things. It says 10:30 to 12:30 for having each candidate come in and meet an executive session with council,
Mhm.
2 hours.
45 minutes per, yeah.
It won't work if you have 4 people.
With a half hour for each candidate plus 10 minutes in between.
I'm sorry, what did you have prior to the 10:30 time? What's going on there?
The senior center
Oh,
gathering?
yes, the senior center, informal time for people to come and just meet the candidates and not a real formal structure.
But do we want to, and again, that could be shuttling them back and forth, so they're not all in one place at the same time. They're
That
over here
could
for an
be.
hour with you, hour over there, hour back, and we can do something with the third one that is exciting and different. I don't know.
Right.
But that makes your time much more efficient. If you start at 8 a.m. with those, and we're rotating folks in and out of the senior center, it lets more people, I think, get access if seniors can put up with that length of time for their.
So one thing that might be good is if we could tag team that with our meetings with them, because I
Yeah.
thought
Yeah, that's
our
what she was saying.
executive session was 11 to make a decision. That's what I have on my calendar, that by the end of that morning, that's what I have from our last meeting on last Friday.
Well, executive session to discuss, yeah. But
I couldn't wrap my head around that, because you won't have, your survey results won't all be back, and you won't have input from there and any of the senior folks, because there won't be time, and
Yeah, I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong, I'm
We
just
did
saying
have-
what
we
we
did
have
have
on our
this-
calendars.
I remember when we came in to sit down with the candidates, we did have the survey results. I mean, people who did it quickly. People passed them in at the end of the forum, and the staff had already had chance.
they were super quick, I do know
Yeah,
that.
so we did have them then.
Mhm.
But I think if we did rotate the informal senior center meeting with bringing them to meet with council, that could work out and take up the morning and then also have time to for council to meet afterwards to discuss. Because we can't make a formal,
Right.
how does that part
No.
work?
Right.
Yeah, you can't.
So, all right, so I think we need an hour minimum, but we can also make that maximum with each candidate on that last day for the interview. Because remember, part of that interview was also some scenario-based kinds of things. Yes.
Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm
We
remembering
had
scenarios.
we had a very good one for you guys.
So if we started at 8:30, and assuming we have 3 candidates, one at 8:30, one at 9:30, one at 10:30, and then 11:30 to 12:30, council meets as a body to discuss.
Sure. Or alternatively, we could move that executive session to the Monday before our meeting.
Well, it's all executive session.
Right, but I mean, the one where we, because that would allow for more time to summarize feedback, that sort of thing. So, I mean, I'm not saying we can't do it at the end of that third day, but, you know, we do have other options.
Or have lunch, go off on our own, have lunch and come back. I sort of like doing it on the same day and making the decision
Uh-huh.
while things are fresh. I see a head shaking.
I just have a lot of scheduling issues that day.
Oh, okay.
Well, you do have time, and I had asked Bettina if it would be possible to give a couple of different options, scenario options within that schedule, just to sort of pick from. If you felt too pressured or there wasn't enough time for something, to have a couple of options. And we also don't know if you're absolutely got 3 people or you may have 4 people, and this is going to be a fluid type of thing. So perhaps if a couple of options could be made available kind of at that last point when you meet tomorrow for folks to look at and think about.
You saying that we should give the committee option, or the committee should give council
Committee should give
option?
you options, like,
Oh, okay.
based on kind of what council's saying, we'd like an hour for each candidate, we need to have an executive session, we may want to come back on this day, we may want, you know, an
Well,
executive session.
council, we can decide pretty much when we want to make the decision, but, that period of time.
Mhm.
Mhm.
But, yeah, I like that idea of bringing them in from the senior center. I think like that would give everyone enough time.
And also, if we have, you know, people that are flying out, then that could also affect the order. So, you know,
Yeah.
somebody might have their senior center time and then be the second person, and then they can get a flight.
That would mean the senior center would need to be willing to play host from 8:30 to 11:30.
Mhm.
So, okay. That,
Okay, so then I'm just gonna go back to, I heard facility tours for Wednesday. That was what I was talking about for Tuesday. I think it is a better use of time from like 3 to 6 to do the facility tour when they come in. So that we have more time on Wednesday for the stakeholder meetings and that piece.
So you want to do the facilities tour on Tuesday evening?
Like 3 to 6.
Facilities or businesses?
I'm thinking village facilities.
Okay, so that would be my staff, right?
Yes.
I'm just clarifying that
Right.
you need, okay.
So like 3 to 6, let them go. And then, you know, Wednesday, there's plenty going on because they've got the village team meetings, they've got stakeholder meetings. They're going to those, let's say, the village institutions,
Yep.
like Antioch College and so on. I mean, they've got to go to the schools and have the kindergartners tour them around and show project-based learning, you know, I mean, that kind of stuff's really cool. And so I would think then, on those facility tours, if we did that Tuesday, they can all go together.
And they could come in earlier than 3, and, you know, if we know somebody's coming in, we'll have somebody ready to take them around. There's Brad, Johnny, myself, Ben, Tanner, I mean, we've got plenty of people that can fill whatever time slot is needed to get them around to the different facilities.
That gives them more context for those village team meetings the next day, too.
Yeah, I agree.
were you saying that it's not a problem for them to stay that late?
Well, we can figure it out. Johnny and I are salaried, so it doesn't matter. If we have Ben, Tanner, and Brad take the early candidates, we can take the later ones.
Okay,
Okay.
so we're pretty good with,
Yeah.
I guess, the
So
broad strokes?
just to clarify in terms of scheduling for my calendar, it sounds like council will be involved beyond the original after 11 to 1 that we blocked at our last Friday meeting. So we're going to need to be available at or after 1 o'clock into the afternoon to interview with people. That's what it sounds like.
Well, we were saying that on, are you talking about on
The 11th.
Wednesday?
No, Thursday, the 11th. Thursday, it was my understanding that we were going to get involved with some breakfast stuff, and
Yeah,
then from
okay.
11 to 1, I had blocked off. But other than that, I didn't think we were seeing people.
No, so what we are saying now is we would be seeing candidates from 8:30 through 11:30.
Okay.
I'll just throw one more thing out there. The nonprofit networking lunch is on that Tuesday,
I was thinking that.
which would be a great opportunity for them to, you know, meet a lot of folks and also get lunch.
If they want to come in early,
And it's at the Glen, which is kind of cool. Yes, Megan?
it'd have to be all or nothing.
As a citizen,
Yes.
my comment would be that, you know, if I went to the thing on Wednesday night, knowing, I mean, when would I have to contact you to let you know who my preference would be? I think
That
that's a
day.
really, yeah, I mean,
Well,
you're
Fill out the
already in.
survey.
Yeah, you'd actually be given
Right.
something to fill out as you walked in the door.
Sure, but in terms of, you know, just talking, it just feels like it would be nice to give citizens a little bit more time to have input rather than like the next day the decision's made. That's my personal opinion. And then just in terms of making that decision, I guess I'm just curious, that process, like, you have to actually ask them, they have to accept, I mean, like, just how that would work, when you would basically be letting people know, or are you planning to wait until council meeting to do that? And then also, when are you gonna announce the final 3 or 4 candidates? When does that become public?
Yeah. So finalists will be announced on April 1st at our council meeting. I also think we need to really consider, are we gonna have all the information by Thursday afternoon? I mean, I remember we did get that report, and, you know, we had some, Kate, were you involved with that? I know Bettina was. But, you know, somebody stayed up, or a couple people stayed up and worked on that and got it to us. But are we gonna have time to absorb all those comments when we're doing 3 hours of interviewing? Which is why I tend to think that we push it to Monday. And then, of course, we do have to give some time, you know, to like make that offer. So we won't know the new village manager on the 15th. But that discussion will begin, I think, after that.
What?
So,
Well,
I mean, you know, like if last time Chris was tasked with,
yeah.
Oh,
You know,
contact.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because you have to offer the position, and then Chris has to do the negotiation with the contract, which is kind of a back and forth for a couple weeks. So I agree that you're not gonna know, you're not gonna have a firm announcement.
right,
You definitely don't wanna say, we've offered it to, and then have that person not take it for whatever
So
reason.
Brian, were you suggesting that on the 15th, like, we have an executive session before council meeting for council
yeah.
members to
And so then
discuss?
we could put out that if a citizen, you know, wants to contact us, they've got basically until Monday at 6, when we go into executive session, to call, email, you know, those kind of, you know, last opportunities.
Is an hour enough?
I don't know,
I don't know.
yeah,
I mean, it's a big conversation,
Sure.
you know?
sure.
Well, I mean, I
maybe.
don't think we met with, I think that we have time within that time that we're talking with people. You know, after everyone, after a person, you sort of debrief that conversation, or we debrief that conversation.
True.
Yep, and then we have time to think more about it, and then as Megan mentioned, time for people to still get in contact with us. And I guess if an hour's not enough, then we go back into executive session after the meeting, or set up another one.
Or start the meeting a little bit late, I'm sure people would understand.
Okay,
Okay, I think,
well, looks great. It exhausts me just thinking about it, but that's part of the strategy, right, Patty?
That's
If
it.
you can make it through, then
That's
we know that you
right.
can do it.
That's right, by
All
golly.
right.
By golly.
I can't, I gotta be nice. We're on camera. By
Okay.
golly.
All right, Lisa, the police department assessment updates.
Right, so I'll get started off and then hand off to Mary Ann. As you may recall, we are looking at an assessment of the police department and have had conversations with Bob Wasserman, as we've talked about in the past. Bob has relationships in Yellow Springs. He knows Yellow Springs and has also had an extremely extensive career in law enforcement. We did receive now from the firm that he works with is called Hillard Heinz. So even though it doesn't say Bob Wasserman, that is the Wasserman proposal. Those of you who've been tracking the proposal for the police assessment will recognize in the proposal, it looks very, very similar to the bullet points that we wrote in the assessment, and I think that's a good thing. They're proposing a 10-week project. You'll see in that proposal a set of activities that includes document review, policy procedure and performance evaluation process, workload, staffing levels. So that's good because it, gets involved in that budgeting piece that matters to us. There's a big focus on police-community relationships, looking at the citizen complaint process that have been recommended, review the disciplinary system and past cases where discipline has been administered or not administered. Looking at some of the various community initiatives such as mediation and the future Justice System Commission. Very importantly, facilitating 1 or 2 community forums to gain community perception. That's something that we've been talking about, interviewing all members of the police department, engaging a range of community members, and then develop a set of recommendations to improve the policing environment in Yellow Springs and increase morale within the police department. And then a final report to council setting forth findings and recommendations. My assessment is that we're very fortunate because they've agreed to do this at our budget. And when you look at that compared to their billing rate, this is a significant value from a very high-quality consulting firm because of the connections to Yellow Springs. That's why they're doing this. And they are proposing 3 stages. And when you look at the bulleted list that's part of the proposal, you can kind of see that there's 3 phases where one phase would be, all of the document analysis and interviews. The second phase would be more of that community engagement phase, and then the third phase would be the reporting and analysis. So I'm going to stop talking for a minute and let Mary Ann talk, but my recommendation is that we move forward with this. The money's in the budget, and I'd like approval of council to move forward.
So Lisa and I had begun the process, I don't know, a month or so ago, I guess, of starting to reach out to talk to potential resource people who might advise us on who we might get to come in. And I think Lisa probably talked to more people than I. We talked to Vaughn and Beth Crandall. I initially talked to a woman that Vaughn Crandall had recommended who teaches at the University of Cincinnati. And initially she said something like, well, you're going to be hard pressed to find someone who find a really well-known firm that's going to do it because, 1, they're going to charge more than you can pay, and 2, they mostly work with big police departments. But she did tell me, she recommended someone, and I actually got an inquiry from a man who's a former chief in Ohio, chief of police, who's doing this on his own, basically. And then what happened is several people started recommending Bob Wasserman to us. I think 3 separate individuals did. So I called the woman that, Robin, I forget her last name, at UC back, and I said, what do you know about Bob Wasserman? He's been recommended to us. And she said, oh, yeah, I know who he is. He would be great. So the fact, I think that the thing that has me recommend him is not only is he recognized worldwide as a leader in police assessment and the sensibility of the need for policing to fit the community, the relationship between the police and the community as being fundamental. But the other thing is that because he went to Antioch and he married a woman from Yellow Springs, and he worked with Chief McKee. He actually was assistant manager under Walter Cahoe. He knows Yellow Springs. He gets Yellow Springs. So we have sort of the best of both worlds, someone who is internationally recognized, but also knows and understands our community. And I'm just not convinced we could do better than that. The one thing that I was thinking, though, well, two more things, I guess. In regard to the community forums, I think that that's something we can pretty much handle, and I've already, the mediation program has indicated a willingness to help. I think HRC has indicated a willingness to help. The McKee group has, and I think 365. So I think from those organizations and commissions, we could get enough people to help facilitate a pretty robust community discussion, 1 or 2 maybe, in which people, when I was coordinating mediation program in the 90s, we had something like this and about police, and we broke up into small groups all over the village building, so people had a chance to meet together, and then there'd be a facilitator and I think a recorder in each small group. So probably it would be something like that. The other thing I wanted to talk about was the price. Our budget was $30,000, and they've come in at $30,000, but it also says $30,000 plus expenses. So I was thinking that perhaps, one, we need to find out get an idea of what the expenses would entail. I mean, Bob said he could stay at his cousin's house or brother's house in town, but he's also working with this other person. I was thinking perhaps of requesting a grant from the Community Foundation to cover, find out what the ballpark range would be of expenses, and then requesting a grant to cover that. And
Great idea. Because, that was the big thing I wanted to ask is, do we know what expenses
I
looks
think we
like?
need to
Yeah,
inquire about
but
that.
I agree, I think it would be a great idea to request a grant, Marianne. Great idea.
So,
All right. Excellent. Well, so, I think the main thought to me is that this looks great, but I'd just like to know what that expenses piece looks like. And then also how we might be able to balance that, with things like facilitating the community conversations and whatnot. But I agree. I think that I can't imagine that we would get this kind of expertise for this kind of fee.
Is looking into the cost of expenses and that sort of that finance business end something, Patty, that you can do so that we don't have to get involved with negotiating that finance side?
Yeah, I can talk to them about it and see how
what
much.
they estimate.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right.
you want to say?
Can you please send me, well, I can contact
Yeah.
Mark Jablonski.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Oh, you're
good.
okay with it?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea.
No, I mean, do you have other things you want to talk
No,
about?
I just want to keep moving forward on this. I think that you hit all the points.
Okay, so is council ready to take whatever the next step is to move forward on this?
I mean, in theory, yes, I guess I'd just like to,
Chris and I are working on the contract to take this proposal and put it into a contract form. I hope to have that done by Wednesday, and then I can contact them and check out the expenses and have that
Okay.
become part of the contract if you want that.
So
brought back.
that would come to council at our next meeting?
Yeah, because council would have to approve it anyway.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
So that's the first.
That's really, we're losing time. The
what-
first, no, the first is okay. Sorry, I was thinking of April when there's 5 weeks. Yeah, the first.
okay, so, good. Thanks. All right, that's great. So, manager's report.
I'm just gonna hit some of the highlights here as quickly as I can. You see that Johnny's gonna be on vacation, March 30th to April 6th, or April 8th, I'm sorry. So if you have any questions during that time that would be referred to Johnny, please call the dispatch and they will forward you to the appropriate person, or call my office and we'll make sure the appropriate person gets your request or message. The utility roundup, donate, sign up for the utility roundup. We need to keep this program going. It is so important, and we are helping many applicants. We had 3 in January, 4 in February, so please continue to donate. If you don't know how to sign up, please call the utility office at 767-7202 extension 2, and they will be happy to help you. The police department has a lot going on. Second mandatory scenario-based training is March 20th. Also, the police department has, this is very important, has received provisional certification to the Ohio Police Collaborative. We're working towards full certification there, but congratulations to the department on the provisional certification. That's very important. They are interviewing to fill the vacant officer position. Karen McKee and Janet Mueller are serving as members of that interview committee, as citizen members of the interview committee, which is very encouraging. Appreciate that they were agreeable to doing that. And Sergeant Josh Knapp has submitted his resignation to the department effective March 31st so that he can pursue other opportunities. Josh has been working on a couple of different things to kind of, going to school for different things and looking to move himself ahead, which we commend him for. We will miss him. He is luckily for us going to come back as an as-needed officer, which we very much appreciate because Josh is a very skilled officer. So then you will see the hitching post request. I've put a little brief in there about that, and that is staff's recommendation that that individual seek, private property or other perhaps public entities for that. We just don't feel it's appropriate on public land, or especially on a roadway, especially when we have such a premium on parking spaces. And we don't provide it for any other individual business, which is what this is. And I'm very excited to announce that I got a grant for my food forest. I got $5,000 from Greene County Parks and Trails. Thank you, Greene County Parks and Trails and the county commissioners. I appreciate it so much. I've already met with Macy and Anna from the tree committee who are helping me out with this. Johnny and I are going to walk X Park with Chris Hodgson from the tree committee on Thursday to determine how many of which plants we need. We have 2 Eagle Scouts that want to work on this project. Peter Skidmore and Xenia Miyazaki.
Yep.
And so we're very excited about this. I'm talking to someone, a group of someones that I'm hoping will be they need service hours, and I'm hoping they'll be my volunteer waterers for the first 3 years during the summer months to keep this going. So it is moving along.
And Cresco,
And Cresco.
because they mentioned at the chamber meeting that they're ready to start doing their community service hours.
Oh,
so-
excellent, excellent. So if I don't get this other group that I'm already begging, I will definitely turn to Cresco because I think the tree committee is probably going to pull their watering truck down there on the days that it's needed, and then I'll just have to have my volunteers go water.
Watering plants seems to be a fitting way for Cresco individuals to
Right?
get community service, doesn't
That
it?
is perfect.
And now more of the same.
So, yeah. So I am very excited about that. I'm really happy that I got the grant because that helps a lot with it and it moves it forward very quickly. The question now is the stock that we decide on going to be available in the spring to get it done in April or May, or do we have to wait until the fall when the stock becomes available? So we're walking the park on Thursday to see what we're going to put in there, and hopefully we'll have a little bit better idea by then. But my 2 Eagle Scouts are very excited about this, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the tree committee's help, the Eagle Scouts, Parks and Trails, and Johnny Burns, God love him, is putting one more thing on his plate for me. So I really appreciate that very much.
Well, and we appreciate that you're completing this
Yeah.
project. I do want to highlight to remember in the future, when Patty first came on and we were talking about like a bridge over Ellis Pond and all these things, she regularly mentioned Eagle Scouts. About 3 months ago, they asked me to come and speak, and basically I talked about here are some projects. They loved the food forest thing. And so I think we need to remember that, like having some council member talk to them or the village
Right.
manager every year.
Right.
Because that was cool to hear that they came
Yes,
forward.
yes, and it wasn't just one of them. I was sitting
Right.
there talking to one of them, to Peter and his mother, and she says, well, I know another scout that'd be interested in this. Because Peter wants to do the informational brochure part so that folks know what the different items are and how they can use them in their diet. But Xenia was more of I would like to do the, let's get this thing installed and, kind of thing. So it's great.
Does the park have a name?
We just call it AX Park right now.
AX.
Yeah, Alan Xenia.
Oh, maybe that's something we can take on, giving it a
Yeah.
name.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. That's it?
That's it.
So does this mean we are not making a decision about the SBA lease until the next meeting?
Oh, you know what? I thought I did not pay attention that was not even a specific thing on here. We can certainly talk about it if you want.
Well, it is 9:45.
Stokes has a strong perspective on
And
that.
Kevin has a strong perspective. I'm not convinced that this is something that we don't discuss. So I would say we make sure it is definitely on the April 1st agenda as an old business item. And we could apologize to SBA about a slight more delay. Okay, so clerk report?
Nope.
All right, anyone want to highlight anything about their boards or commissions? I do just want to say something, which is the Greene County Regional Planning has decided in updating their comp plan that they are going to do a Greene County Trail Plan. So I'm really excited about that. So I will be keeping us up to date. So then finally, future agenda items.
Yeah. So I'll have something written for the
I do it past tense.
transient guest lodging. I think, and I'll have a report from the Housing Advisory Board.
Wait, I'm sorry, what did you say about transient guest lodging?
I said that I would write up something for council to review then we would send to planning commission.
Okay.
About transient guest lodging, what
Right,
what
but
our
we're also
priorities-
bringing the ordinance, so,
Right. Yeah, both.
okay.
I think by April 15th, we should have a DCIC update.
Okay. Yep.
Announcement of your 3 final candidates. YS Pride, how did you want to deal with that? Special reports, announcements?
I think they're just going to do citizen concerns.
Okay, so
Um,
don't put them on the agenda?
No.
Okay.
So SBA lease,
Police assessment, contract.
On the first, yeah.
Yep,
And then the charter review.
charter, yep.
And I assume these ordinances, from Denise are pretty basic, just definitional things?
They all refer to one piece. So it's changing that one thing all through the zoning code. So it's very simple to explain,
Okay.
in fact.
All right, well, that will be plenty. Any other things for the future that should be on our radar?
That I can think of right now.
All right, awesome. If not, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I move.
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.